Hey guys, this is Frank Yecker, and you're listening to Submission Radio.
Hey, this is Rich Franklin.
What's up, everybody? This is Chris Lieben. This is Diego Sanchez. Randy Couture.
Alistair Overeem.
Hi, this is Stephen Bonner.
This is Don Fry.
Hey, I'm Phil, Mr. Wonderful Davis.
TJ Dillashaw.
You're listening to Submission Radio. Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
You're listening to Submission Radio.
Welcome to another episode of Submission Radio. It's Wednesday, the 1st of November, episode 144 of Submission Radio, UFC 217 preview show. We can see you out there, hungry eyes. It's going to be a big, big weekend, and we have a big program for you.
I feel like nobody is hungrier than me right now. I am starving for UFC 217. I'm so excited. It's fight week. And here we are. Our job is to get you guys pumped up. And we figured, you know what? We can't do it by ourselves. We need a lot of help. And we're bringing a ton of help this week. We've got John Morgan, the man in blue, none other than the man himself, jumping on the program to preview UFC 217. In fact, what am I talking about? The whole show is dedicated to previewing UFC 217. John Morgan is the first man on the show. We've got Robin Black making his return after a while of not being on the program. Can't wait to chat to him, get his technical analysis. Tommy Toehold is coming on the show as well. A cheeky interview with GSP that may not really be GSP, or maybe it is GSP. Who knows these days? But Tommy Toehold will be giving you guys a treat. Jake Shields is returning to the program. He's been training with GSP, helping him prepare for this Michael Bisping fight. So we thought, you know what, we have to get him on and pick his brain. Also, Dan Hardy making his Submission Radio debut, the first time ever speaking to him. Obviously, a man who fought GSP many years ago, UFC 111. Of course, he's going to be giving us his technical insight. So there's a lot to talk about on the program, a lot of questions to ask, a lot of people to talk to, and that's not even it. We've got some more cheeky guests, don't we, Dennis?
That's right, guys. As you may remember, last week, a good friend of the program, Sean Sheehan, issued a little bit of a warning, a little bit of a challenge to the MMA media landscape. Let's have a listen.
I reckon I'd beat anyone in the world in FIFA and from the MMA media. I reckon I'm putting that out there now. Challenge me. Come on, I'm here. Knock me off my farts.
You're going full Darren Till on us. I'm the fucking best FIFA player in the world. I fucking know it.
Well, you know what? We're going to have to get this going because I know there'll probably be a few people out there that are going to want to challenge you. So the challenge is out there, guys. Sean Sheehan, FIFA challenge on the line. What can you offer for whoever takes on the challenge?
I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know. Maybe you admit that they're the greatest FIFA player on Severe MMA, and if you beat them, they're going to tweet it out if they don't have a worldwide phenomenon podcast like yourself.
Okay, well, if they can produce it, like they can do that. They're well able to do that. Yeah, I'll advertise their podcast on my podcast if they beat me. That's fair enough.
Well, there you guys go.
Wow.
A challenge to all the MMA media world out there went out online, and only one man stepped up to take the challenge. That is Danny Segura from the MMA Beat. You know, his fantastic work. And as soon as he jumped on, he got a little bit of a friend, a little bit of a helping hand. New York Rick, that's right, New York Rick decided to become a part of this thing. He saw this was going to make millions of dollars. He saw this was going to break the records. Let's be honest, this is the money contest. Forget McGregor Mayweather. This is the big matchup, the FIFA contest of a lifetime. So much on the line, the championship on the line, respect on the line, a lot on the line. He got involved. So today, at the end of the program, stick around, guys, because for the first time ever, New York Rick, Danny Segura, and Sean Sheehan are all going to be on at once previewing this huge FIFA match. They're going to be making statements. They're going to be letting you know when it's going down, and they're going to be talking about exactly what you guys can expect from this matchup. I hear there's a lot of bad blood, Cass, but we can't have them in the same room. Good thing we live in Australia, so that wouldn't even happen. Sean lives in Ireland and they're in New York, but still, even on the same line, I'm worried what's going to happen. We've got Skype security. They disconnect calls if things get too wild. Jake Shields is on here. Maybe we can ask him about what's going to happen if a virtual coffee gets thrown in someone's face. Things are going to get wild, guys. So stick around for that. And don't forget as well, because these guys are some of the brightest minds in the MMA world. It is UFC 217 coming up, so you better believe we'll be getting some predictions from them as well.
Yeah, I feel like rumor has it that the only reason why Sean lives in Ireland and New York, Rick is in New York, and Danny Segura is over there as well, is to keep them from tearing each other apart and getting at each other's throats. Very smart, whoever organized that. But yeah, like you mentioned, there will be predictions at the end of the show. There will be predictions flowing throughout the entire show from John Morgan, from Robin Black, from Jake Shields, from Dan Hardy, and of course, like you mentioned, Danny Segura, New York Rick, and Sean Sheehan. So if you are a betting man or woman, we we got you covered. If you want some insight on UFC 217, we got you covered. If you want laughs, we've got you covered as well. Feel free to jump in the comment section below. If you are watching on YouTube, let us know what you think about all the fights. Give us your predictions, give us your thoughts. If you agree, if you disagree, it doesn't matter. We want to hear what you guys say. We love reading all your comments. And we try and respond to as many of them as possible. Either way, even if we don't, we read them all. Don't be afraid to jump on Twitter as well. Give us your thoughts. If you're not listening on YouTube, at SubmissionAUS, fire off. Come at us, tweet at us, let us know what you think. Our DM's open, you can slide right in. And if you are in the mood, feel free to give us a cheeky iTunes review while you're at it. You can also like the Facebook page, facebook.com/SubmissionRadioAU. Dennis doing a great job of running that, responding to you guys, putting up all sorts of funny videos, GIFs, all sorts of things. Where were you when Dennis posted about UFC Perth and everybody went wild? So a lot of great stuff there. Without further ado, it is time to get this massive, massive, massive show on the road. A lot of guests, a lot of people to speak to. And Dennis, I believe the first one is on the line and you're about to introduce him.
All right, guys, with a massive event in UFC 217 around the corner, we called up the jet-flying, kiss-stealing, wheeling-dealing son of a gun who has covered events worldwide and made him cry. I'm, of course, talking about the man that is the reason why blue Adidas polos are sold out across the country. MMA junkie and MMA Roadshow's own John Morgan. Welcome back to the program, man.
Only show up for the intros, my friends. Only show up for the intros.
I feel like 99% of our guests pretty much say the same thing. So, yeah, you're not the only one.
It's about to get real bad from here, John. You know the drill.
Oh, yeah, you just start off at the top, and then you know it's straight downhill from there.
Nosedive. I mean, welcome back to the show. And we know we've just caught you fresh off another flight coming to New York after a big trip to Brazil. Still don't know how you do it with such a crazy schedule. How are you holding up right now? And how many frosty beverages will you need to get the system running smoothly again?
Well, listen, I mean, you need a little lubrication just to keep the joints working properly. You know what I'm saying? But no, yeah, it's been a crazy schedule for sure, man. It was Poland a couple weeks back, Sao Paulo last week, and then straight on to New York this week. But it's been fun, man. I don't have to tell you guys. Each fight week is like its own little story, man. You're in a new location. You had all the crazy security concerns that were going on in Poland. You had the return of Lyoto Machida and the rise of Colby Covington in Sao Paulo. And then now, of course, we're coming to this blockbuster event with Michael Bisping versus George St-Pierre, the 3 title fights, being at Madison Square Garden again. So, yeah, it's always fun, man. It's, people ask sometimes, how do you feel jet lagged? I'm like, I don't even know what that is anymore. I think I'm just constantly exhausted, but I still love it. I stiof love it.
Yeah, I just have memories of you and Casper falling asleep next to each other in the waiting area outside Anaheim Arena. But just speaking of Brazil, yeah, well, so people thought you guys were dead and trying to steal wallets. Just speaking of Brazil, I just want to get you what it was like being there, because we all read about and we saw the great coverage that you did with Covington and what he said to the people. Apparently, there were some security concerns. People were going crazy. How bad was it there? How bad was the, I suppose, lashback from the people after those comments? Because reading it online, it seemed like it was pretty hectic over there.
Yeah, it definitely was. I mean, especially right afterwards. It was crazy because, I couldn't even hear what Colby Covington was saying in the octagon afterwards. The boos were so loud inside that arena, the screams and the chants. Like, you literally couldn't hear a single word he was saying. So that was pretty bizarre. And they rushed him out of there. And then, from my understanding, they basically just took him straight back to the hotel. Like, didn't even, he didn't show up to the post-fight press conference. And then, fortunately, Colby was nice enough to allow us to come to his hotel room and do a little interview with him afterwards. And it was crazy because he was still sticking with everything. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of one of those weird things because he's playing a role to a degree, but it is who he is as well. You know what I mean? It's
Chael Sonnen-ish kind of.
It is. Chael Sonnen, I always feel weird, like, how much do you want to pull back the curtain? You know what I mean? Chael Sonnen will sit there and yell at you and tell you suck as an interviewer and that you're horrible and that your questions are terrible. And as soon as the camera's off, say, oh, hey, thanks for the time, guys. It was fun. I really appreciate it, And Colby's very much the same way. So, but I'll tell you what, it's been such an interesting fallout over the last couple of days because I get why people are offended. I get why people are upset. But I mean, if you're Colby Covington, you're getting your name known. You know what I mean? And it's kind of the double-edged sword that we have in this sport these days, right? Like, you want that trash talk, you want that attention grabbing, but then at the same time, it's a little frustrating. At the same time, is it WWE? Is it real MMA? Or what is it? So it's an interesting time in the sport, and I think Colby Covington is kind of becoming that light rod right now.
Just quickly to follow up on that, do you think it's a little bit contradictory? We saw some of the UFC execs were not really too happy, obviously, Colby Covington saying things to the people of Brazil, but at the same time, the UFC want a star, and this is kind of how you get it, kind of like how Chael Sonnen made his name off being the bad guy. Do you think in a lot of ways, this is exactly what the UFC would, should be wanting?
Well, I thought it was an interesting juxtaposition, especially, like I said, just coming from Poland, where we had the whole issue with the soccer ultras, and kind of storming the arena, and there was some real security concerns in Poland. So I kind of get where they're saying, like, yes, we want you to toe the line, yes, we want you to push the envelope a little bit, but we also have to be very careful as well, because you are talking about the fact they did have to assign security to Colby Covington's room for the rest of the night in Sao Paulo. They had to assign extra people to be around him to escort him to the airport. So you're talking about logistical issues, which cost you money and which also cost planning and time and headaches and all that stuff. And they are real. Sometimes we kind of joke about it and we think about it, but again, 1 week earlier we were in Poland and we saw this issue where, riot police were stopping us. Myself and Cole Coffee and Pear, we were just talking about it right before we jumped on with you guys. It was crazy to walk out of an arena and have, riot police stopping people and asking them for their IDs and where they're going and that sort of stuff. It's wild and things, felt very, very tense inside that building for quite a bit during the weigh-in. So, you want the show and you want stars, and this seems to be the way. Everybody's following the Conor McGregor approach, right? And everybody's trying to follow their own way, and you want to do that. But there are very, very real concerns that come along with that.
I think those are some really valid points you made. All right, well, let's move on now. Obviously, you're in New York City for the big one. Very, very solid card. I want to get your thoughts on some of the matchups. Even the Fight Pass prelim card is full of fun with OSP versus Corey Anderson. Also a heavyweight clash between Alexei Oleinik and Curtis Blaydes. This is a big fight for the heavyweight division, especially as Blaydes wants to sort of begin his run for the title. He got that last win last time. Somewhat critical on his performance, but he wants to put in an impressive showing here. Do you think he's got what it takes to beat the very tough veteran in Alexei Oleinik?
It's tough. I do like Curtis Blaydes. His personality, he's a great guy to talk to and just very humble and down to earth. And he does have some talents. And, in the heavyweight division, we're looking for those young guys, right? It seems you look down the rankings in the heavyweight division and everybody's, 35 plus, it seems like. So when you get some fresh blood in there, it's really nice. But, man, Oleinik is the real deal. And it's so crazy because if you just look at him, it's not really that impressive, right? If you look at the physique, if you look at the way he walks, hell, even the way he fights to a degree, it's not like he's, moving around the cage like an athlete, He's kind of lumbering in there and just, stumbling towards you almost. But, man, the squeeze he has is legitimate. So, I'd probably favor Alexei in this, to be honest with you, especially if, obviously, he's got to get a hold of him. I don't think he wants to sit there and try to strike with Curtis Blaydes, but Oleinik is the real deal. It's funny. You talk to the people at American Top Team that train with him. They're all in awe of this guy and what he's able to do with his chokes from all angles.
And the main event prelim fight is also an excellent contest between James Vick and the man with a victory over Conor McGregor, Joe Duffy. Vick has been able to rack up some back-to-back wins, finishing both fights, but also Duffy is on a 2-fight win streak as well. Who are you leaning towards in this fight? Because I feel like there's going to be a lot of eyes on this fight, and the winner here will get a lot of steam and behind them in their run.
Yeah, I love this. I guess probably I'm a little bit biased here. James Vick, the Texecutioner, he comes out of my neck of the woods, But I tell you what, listen, I think Joseph Duffy is the more polished product. There's no question about it. The guy has looked fantastic lately, and his striking is really on point. But James Vick, man, there's something about this kid. Just the what he brings to the table, his size, the way he moves. He's got a little chip on his shoulder right now, man. I think he's angry. I think he wants to prove to the world that he deserves. Look at the record he's put together in the UFC and just gets completely overlooked. So I'm actually leaning a little bit towards James Vick. And like I said, there may be a little Texas bias in there, but I do love what this kid brings. He's so tall for the division, so rangy, and again, kind of angry. I like guys that fight with a chip on their shoulder. I like guys that fight with something to prove.
Yeah, and James Vick, he's been breaking hearts for a long time. I still remember, I think it was UFC Adelaide when he beat our very own Jake Matthews. So no doubt going to this fight with that chip on his shoulder, like you mentioned. Moving on, Johnny Hendricks obviously kicks off the main card against Paulo Borrachinha. Paulo's obviously been slaying it at 26, finishing all of his 10 fights in the first round. I believe the only one that didn't finish in the first round finished in the second round. Hendricks obviously, on the contrast, has had some tough times with weight cuts and sicknesses. Do you think that UFC 217 will see a new star being born in Paulo Borrachinha, or do you think a healthy Hendricks is still sort of dangerous at middleweight?
No, listen, I love Johnny Hendricks. He's a great guy. He used to live out in Vegas for the longest time, and used to, come by and spend 2 hours in the MMA Junkie radio studio, and just such a great guy. But I just don't see him having success in the middleweight division. I just don't, man. I mean, even at welterweight, I always thought this was a guy that if he really, really wanted to, could get down to lightweight. He's not a big guy. Meanwhile, you got an absolute specimen in Borrachinha, and Hendricks is definitely the more seasoned fighter. I think the more talented fighter, maybe a little bit of a stretch, but I mean, he's definitely been more well-rounded. He's been through bigger tests. He's fought bigger names, but I just think at 185 pounds, Borrachinha is just way too big, too powerful, and I think he's going to have his way with Johnny Hendricks early in this fight. I hate to say it.
And I mean, Hendricks was on the program. We spoke about how he was sick last time and it affected his weight cut. But if he does struggle with weight and doesn't make weight for this one, do you believe that is the final time we'll see him fighting for the UFC?
Man, if he doesn't make weight, yeah, I'd have to think so. I hope that's not the case. As you said, the illness was there before. But if he doesn't make weight, yeah, I got to think the UFC is ready to start taking a look. I mean, here's a guy who's, on the tail end of his career, and he's getting into his late 30s, and yeah, I just can't see them putting up with that. If he makes weight and he comes out and he has a fight of the night type performance, or at least, hell, listen, I'm not counting him out. I mean, that's what we love about the sport, right? I mean, even when you say, I feel pretty confident this is what we're going to see, the great thing about this sport is it would not shock you to see the other thing. And Johnny Hendricks is a fantastic wrestler. He is a powerful striker as well. He could come out and shock the world. So there's all kinds of options on the table. But if he doesn't make weight, yeah, I got to think the UFC starts looking at other options.
Absolutely. I mean, I felt Carlos Esparza was going to grind out Joanna Jedrzejczyk, and I've been feeling stupid ever since. But I'm just curious, John, what's your gauge on Paulo Borrachinha? Because if he wins here, obviously, he's 26, very, very young guy, something the division desperately needs. And, by all accounts, this seems like the UFC trying to push Borrachinha. What do you think about him as a fresh face and sort of his ceiling in the division? Do you think he can go pretty far at 185 if he gets past Hendricks this weekend?
Just, from seeing his early fights, yeah, an absolute physical specimen. And he just seems so powerful and capable of doing anything. He doesn't speak English, so I haven't had a chance to really pick his brain and feel about him. From what I understand from Fernando Prates, our Brazilian reporter, he's got kind of some controversial politics behind him. So I don't know if that'll, end up being an issue for him later along.
If you're able to share that. Or not.
I think... Yeah, I won't pretend that I'm an expert in the field of Brazilian politics, but I think he supports some people that are not extremely well liked. But hell, we got Donald Trump as the president, so What do we know about politics?
Let's talk about Thompson versus Masvidal, because this fight in itself could be a co-main event on any card, or a main event on a Fight Pass card. I mean, both men have great striking. Do you think this goes down in the feet, or do you think Masvidal will try and take the advantage of taking advantage of Thompson's holes in his grappling, kind of maybe take the fight down to the ground?
I think that would be the wise thing to do, to be honest with you. I mean, I do think that if Masvidal does try to make this a pure striking contest, which, listen, he's a seasoned striker and he definitely knows what he's doing on the feet. But, I do think Wonder Boy is just a little bit more dynamic than he is. So I think Masvidal, much to the dismay of fans, would be wise to try to grapple a little bit. I think people are kind of, rubbing their hands together at this one because they're thinking it's going to be, a back and forth striking affair. And it very well could be, because Masvidal's as tough as they come. But, the thing is with Masvidal that always trips me out is that, he can fight on the feet, but I think sometimes he likes to counterpunch so much that he ends up being so comfortable moving backwards that he basically gives away rounds. And listen, not to say that you can't win a round moving backwards and counter striking, but man, you're asking a lot of the judges. Let's be honest with you. I mean, there's so much to take in, to try to calculate and witness everything on the fly and to add it up over the course of 5 minutes. Bottom line is, I think if you're, generally speaking, if you're moving backwards and it's kind of 50-50, even let's say it's, one punch for one punch, but you're the guy moving backwards, I think the judges are going to lean to the guy that's moving forward. And if you add in the fact that, Wonder Boy is going to be throwing these crazy kicks and crazy strikes that are going to bring the oohs and the ahs from the crowd, you can't tell me that doesn't impact the judge, whether they mean to consciously or subconsciously. Like, I always believe that those crowd noises do impact the judge, whether they mean for it to or not. So I think it would be wise for Masvidal to try to utilize some grappling in this.
And the crazy thing is they both like to counter at times, and like you mentioned with Masvidal especially, and also Thompson. So I'm very curious who's actually going to come forward in this fight, who's going to bring the pressure. But in terms of sort of what these guys are fighting for, with Lawler fighting RDA, Covington coming off a massive win, what is on the line for the winner of this fight? Like, it just seems like if Thompson wins, he might get another fight, possibly even a Covington. And if Thompson loses, because both Covington and Masvidal refuse to fight, they're obviously very, very close friends, he might still fight Covington. And what is next for Masvidal if he wins, sort of in relation to the title?
Yeah, I agree. I think the terms aren't really clear, and I think that's, you can't really call this a number one contender fight. You can't really say exactly what comes next. It's just going to require, to see what comes after that. There's a lot of variables in play. Yeah, I mean, you've heard Masvidal talk about maybe potentially going back to lightweight if that, because he doesn't want to fight Colby Covington. I mean, there's options out there. I don't think it's clear, but I mean, certainly it will keep that person relevant. The winner of this fight will stay very relevant in that welterweight title picture.
Where do you think GSP fits in when it comes to the welterweight division? I mean, we'll find out later on in the night at UFC 217 what's going to happen, if he'll even still be around. I mean, he has to beat Bisping because he has said he'll retire if he loses. But do you believe that he'll stay away from welterweight, or do you think he might even possibly try and jump in line and challenge Tyron Woodley for a chance to be a dual world champion if he is able to pull off this victory?
No, I think there is a chance that we see GSP at welterweight, win or lose. I mean, I know he's talked about the retirement issue, but we'll see. I mean, listen, George St-Pierre is a martial artist at heart. I've been around him a couple times during his layoff, and he's always working out. I mean, he used to show up and corner Francis Carmont, for instance, and he was always in the workout rooms and putting in sessions and that sort of thing. So, I mean, the guy is always working out, and martial arts is always going to be a part of his life, and therefore, fighting can always be a part of his life. I think there is a potential we could see George St-Pierre at welterweight win or lose. And to be honest with you, I'd much rather see him there. I mean, I hate to say it, and obviously we'll talk about the main event shortly, but I really wish this comeback would have been at 170 rather than 185. I think that's, to me, more intriguing.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. Even though this is kind of, I guess, a safer fight if he does, not safe, but, if he loses to Bisping, there's that, well, he lost to a bigger guy. And like you mentioned, we'll talk about the main event in just a second. Before that, got to get your thoughts, obviously, on Joanna Jedrzejczyk versus Rose Namajunas. Joanna's been able to have 5 successful title defenses, and now she's almost cleaned out the entire division. And although she lost to Kowalkiewicz, a nice win over Waterson has given Rose Namajunas this opportunity. Do you think that the queen of the division will still reign after UFC 217, or do you think maybe Rose has something up her sleeve, something she can show Jedrzejczyk that so far no one else has been able to, and maybe dethrone her?
No, listen, I think Joanna champion keeps her title here. Jedrzejczyk is such a beast in the division. There's no question about it. I do think that Rose Namajunas is a future champion. She will hold this title at some point in her career. I really have no doubt about that. I mean, she is dynamic. Her body is a little bit different. The ranginess, the lankiness that she has, her creativity in not only the striking, but the grappling and the transitions is fun to watch. And I do believe, honestly, that she will be a champion at some point. I just don't think she's got what it takes to beat Joanna Jedrzejczyk right now, who seems to just be getting better as time wears on. I think Joanna will probably end up moving up to that 125-pound division. She's kind of teased it. She says the weight cut isn't too tough for her, but I think that flyweight division is going to be pretty enticing for her, and maybe she decides she's done everything she can do at strawweight at some point. But I think Rose is a future champion. I just don't think it gets done on Saturday night.
And it's interesting that you mentioned that, because we had a look through the rankings trying to figure out what would possibly even be next for her. And the only kind of 2 people that stood out a little bit is Cynthia Calvillo, if she can beat Esparza at UFC 219, or maybe Tisha Torres. But there's no real clear-cut contender in the division at the moment. So do you think maybe there is a good chance post-fight, if she has a dominant win, she may even announce her intentions of moving up?
Well, I think so. I mean, that's what I think makes it more enticing, because exactly what you said. I mean, there's no real names right there that make sense that she has to fight. So, well, listen, we know the rigors of weight cutting on the body for fighters in every division. You know what I mean? But when you start to get to a point where you're like, hey, wait a minute, I'm depleting myself and killing myself to get to a fight that nobody even cares about. Whereas I could, be a little bit more comfortable and a little bit more happier and fight this fresh face, this fresh name. Not that there's one that's there right now, but I mean, soon enough, here in a couple of weeks, there's going to be a champion in that division at 125 pounds. And how great would it be for Joanna to move up and try to take on that person? So, similar to what she did with the title at 115 pounds. So, I do think that's a very real possibility because of not just the body thing. I mean, it sounds like she's pretty comfortable with the weight cut. It sounds like she's not, too miserable at 115 pounds. But if it's a fight that nobody really wants to see and you can move up to 125, why not do it?
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of must-see post-fight press conferences after UFC 217. In the co-main event, you got a fight that to me feels a lot like it reminds me of UFC 194, where we had Luke Rockhold versus Chris Weidman, and I know their careers have sort of taken interesting trajectories since, but at the time, and I feel like you'll agree, John, that was a fight that people saw as just two of the best, really two of the elite middleweights, a real pick-em fight because they were so skilled, and I kind of feel the same way about this one in TJ Dillashaw versus Cody Garbrandt. Really, really interesting styles, really, really elite guys. Who are you sort of leaning towards, between both of their crazy footwork, Garbrandt's knockout power, Dillashaw's, ultra well-roundedness, what we saw from Garbrandt at UFC 207, which shocked a lot of people. Who do you think is walking out with the gold at UFC 217 this weekend?
Well, man, I am loving this fight. I think this is as good as it gets. I mean, this is top two in the world, and I love it. And to show you a little something about rivalry, we talk about Colby Covington and how he sells fights and how you sell rivalries. Just to give you a little input on this, I did find out, actually, as we were getting into New York, these two guys are actually staying in different hotels. The UFC took the extra step to say, you know what? Let's just take the teams and let's separate them. Let's make sure that we don't have to worry about these guys running into each other in the hallway. So that, to me, I mean, when you're talking about the two best guys in the world, and then you're also talking about the fact that they really don't like each other and the people around them really don't like each other, I think that's awesome. I mean, this has everything, right? Where this isn't just flash. This isn't just, hype. This is skill as well. So I don't know. I think that makes it a little more fun. But listen, I'm leaning towards Cody right now. Concerns, right? I mean, the guy's had some injuries. The guy's been dealing with some issues. And TJ Dillashaw is no joke. I mean, what he's been capable of accomplishing, I mean, it seems like it could be the perfect foil to Cody Garbrandt. But, man, how do you get that Dominic Cruz performance out of your head? I mean, was that not one of the greatest fights, single championship fights in terms of performance that we've ever seen? I mean, I really do believe that was just scintillating. If Cody can perform at that level, I think he can edge TJ Dillashaw. I think he's got a little bit more power in his hands as well. I think Cody Garbrandt's the right pick here. I do worry a little bit, about what's been going on. Is he 100% healthy? It sounds like he is, but you worry about it nonetheless. But I tell you what, I am looking forward to this fight. Not only as much as anything on this card, but I mean, as much as anything as I've looked to this year.
And I mean, we spoke about it earlier in the interview, so we have to get your thoughts on it. GSP takes on Bisping. Our very own Australian interim UFC champion Robert Whittaker is flying up for the fight as well. He'll be sitting around there too. What do you expect? I mean, you mentioned that you're not a big fan of GSP coming back to middleweight. You'd like to see it at welterweight, but now that this fight is happening, what are you expecting to see from this matchup? Because, I mean, we've spoken to many people. Everybody's talking about it. There's the size difference. There's the time away from the cage for GSP. What do you think is going down this weekend when it comes down to these two guys getting in the octagon?
Well, listen, I love the fact that Robert Whittaker is coming here fresh off the announcement of Perth. I can't wait for that. Looking forward to being in Western Australia next year. But, yeah, listen, it's a funny fight. This whole Bisping St-Pierre thing is funny because, I believe that, honestly, George St-Pierre wanted this fight because he thinks it's the easiest possible fight for him. And I think Michael Bisping wanted this fight because he believes it's the easiest possible fight for him. So it's so funny that they both probably look at each other like they're chumps and it's the easiest one that they could pick off. But, yeah, the truth is I really do look at the size difference. I mean, there is a big size difference between the two of them. George St-Pierre with 4 years, the layoff, man, that's tough to come back and deal with somebody that's even bigger in size. I think the defensive wrestling of Michael Bisping is underrated quite often. I mean, yes, he's the British guy, and traditionally British guys lack wrestling or whatever. But come on, man, he's been doing this forever. I think Michael Bisping gets this fight. I think he wins this fight, and I think he maybe retires afterwards. Who knows? I don't think he's especially excited about going and fighting a Robert Whittaker, a version 2.0 of himself. You know what I mean? A younger, faster version of himself. And good for him, man. Michael Bisping is just a company guy for so long, has done so much. There's so many fights that I think that the UFC announces, and I'm like, Michael Bisping versus who? I don't care. And then next thing you know, it's fight week, and he's telling Vitor Belfort that there's no Jesus or whatever. You know what I mean? He's doing what he does, and he gets you excited about a fight, man. Michael Bisping's such a fantastic promoter. I think he wins this fight. I will say this though, and this is put the tinfoil hat on, put the think about the options, but here's the crazy thing, and God bless Robert Whittaker, but if GSP does find a way to pull this off, and I've been saying this, if GSP finds a way to pull this off, I think we see GSP Conor McGregor next for the middleweight title of the world. GSP is not a big guy. He's not even a big welterweight by today's standards. He's definitely not that much bigger than Conor McGregor. I think that's one reason we haven't heard an announcement yet, is that if for some reason GSP gets this done, then the real money fight, sorry Tony Ferguson, sorry Nate Diaz, becomes Conor McGregor versus George St-Pierre for the 185-pound title.
It's like a record of how many divisions can be held up all at the same time. The middleweight division, Conor McGregor, the lightweight division, Tony Ferguson. Everyone's just like, poor Robert Whittaker is going to be like ready to get in the cage. Like, here's my moment. They flew me down, and then GSP's going to be like, I want to fight Conor McGregor, and then he's going to be like, all right, I'll just take my seat now.
Listen, in a bizarre but perfect world, and now again, I think Bisping wins this fight, but in a bizarre but perfect world, GSP wins. Conor wins the 185-pound title against GSP, then goes down to 170, fights Tyron Woodley or whoever has it at that point for 170, and then retires, having never defended a single title in his entire life. I love it. I think that would be the greatest shtick of all time. Like, I am a 4-division world champion in the UFC, and I've never defended it once.
Do you know how crazy that sounds, but also given what's happened, probable? You don't really need a tinfoil hat to believe that. And the funny thing is, but Severe MMA and kind of our very own, we'll claim him, Sean Sheehan, has been saying that for a while now, weeks, if not months, that he believes that, McGregor, GSP, middleweight title, and exactly the same theory. So, great minds think alike, and I think that there's definitely a lot of plausibility to that. But look, we've had a lot of fun. I feel like we're being greedy with our time, or with your time, John, as always. It is all happening this weekend at UFC 217, guys. Make sure to listen to the MMA Roadshow and follow John's content on MMAJunkie.com. It's going to be a lot of fantastic coverage. Of course, even though we're not there, John, we'll be looking forward to the most, the early weigh-ins. A lot of drama, a lot of fun stuff there. Don't forget to follow John on Twitter at MMA Junkie John to catch all the latest content. Again, thank you so much for your time and jumping on with us, John. Always appreciate it.
Yep, thanks, guys.
This is Chael Sonnen, and you are listening to Submission Radio.
All right, guys. Well, with UFC 217 around the corner, there is only one man that we needed to come on the program to really get into the dirty of the fights, and that is, of course, Robin Black, who joins us here on Submission Radio. You know him from his amazing work, obviously MMA analyst, color commentator, great YouTube channel, amazing segments, and now he's going on the road as well with Robin Black Live, which is happening December 17th, and hopefully making its way down to Australia one day soon. Robin, welcome to Submission Radio.
Hey, guys. It's always good to hang out with you. I will guarantee you in 2018 I will bring my one-man show to Australia, 100%.
Fantastic. Awesome. Well, look, we look forward to it, but in the meantime, there is so much to discuss with you, Robin, as always, so we'll get straight into it. And rather than us steering the ship, Robin, we'll do something a little bit different because we're curious to find out where your heart lies as a man who lives and breathes fighting. Which fight from the main card are you most looking forward to?
Well, from a nerdy, the beauty of the complexity of fighting kind of angle, which is the way I love to look at it. TJ and Cody Garbrandt is for sure for sure it's on the front end of what it is to evolve the highest level of figuring the thing out. And I was trying to figure out different ways to look at it and really make sense of it. And one of the things that kind of bubbled up is when you look at anything, so soccer or football, as you guys know it, or American football or basketball or anything, there are systems that people run. They'll run a zone defense, a one-on-one defense. They'll run patterns when receivers, like there's all these systems that develop. They haven't always been there. Someone had to develop them. Once upon a time, football guys just lined up and played, or basketball players just ran up and down the court. They had to be developed. The game changed as people developed systems to better operate. And that's what Duane Ludwig has done, and that's something Cody Garbrandt has been doing as well. Like, this isn't the same game when George fought Matt Hughes. It's not at all. It's not thought of the same. It's not expressed the same. It's not trained the same. It's not discussed the same. And I think people like me are doing a very bad job of finding the way to explain to people, if baseball is a different sport than it was 20 years ago, you can't discuss it the same way as we did 20 years ago. This fight demands that, and so it's hard. It's very challenging to really, really get across the point that the way we see it we're missing so much of what's happening. It's a very challenging thing. It's something I'm trying to work on, but it's not something you just invent terminology. You have to find an understanding. And because when you watch these guys fight, they are the way that they're playing with each other's mind, the way that they're telling each other lies and trying to trick each other, the physical way they're moving, the way they move their feet, the way that they implement different systems, trying to sort of overload each other's brains. That's a complex thing. In the end, it's beautiful whether you see it or not. When you see TJ Dillashaw throw a high kick off of a right hand, it's a beautiful thing. When you see Cody Garbrandt push forward and throw hands in combinations, it's an incredible thing to see. But the challenge is to really understand what we're seeing, and I don't know yet how to do that, but that's going to be the goal for 2018.
And I love that, Robin, because in sports like baseball or basketball, you really have to go back in time to really see these points where things are changing. But in MMA, it's such a relatively young sport, but you're able to really not go that long ago, 5-6 years ago, or even just things like, Tito Ortiz has an advantage just because he knows how to do a good ground and pound. And now everything's just completely different. And I agree with you. I think a lot of analysts and commentators are still stuck to those old terminologies when a lot of them don't apply. So that's a really, really good point. But you mentioned this TJ Dillashaw, Cody Garbrandt fight, so we have to get into that one because we're very excited for it as well. And a lot of what makes both TJ and Cody so successful is their outstanding footwork. And as a man who studies a lot of tape, how would you break down the subtleties of each man's footwork? And I mean, if you could say, who do you think may hold the advantage in the footwork area in this fight?
Well, I really think that advantage is a tricky way to put it, because when you run your offense against my defense, there's no win to yours. Which system beats the other? It's not rock, paper, scissors. But yet, so then it comes down to athleticism. It comes down to what kind of shape you're in. There's so many unbelievable variables. But the system that Duane's created is, again, very, very different. If we look at a running back, at one time they would run, just sidestepping on one of those ladders. And you watch a running back or another athlete do it now. They have these incredibly complex footwork games that they do. Fighting, if you take rudimentary fighting, again, Chuck Liddell or Matt Hughes, geniuses of their era, and you have them run the same simulation of their footwork on one of those athletic ladders, and it'll be just step, 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 side to side, forward, backwards, almost like a plus sign. You know what I mean? You go forward, you go backward, you go side, you go side. If you're looking at it from 30,000 feet, it's a plus sign. Whereas TJ Dillashaw are many asterisks all put beside each other. They're, hyper angled asterisks all put from one to the other to the other. So but think about it in terms of where a human being can move from a stance. You can move straight forward, you can move straight back, you can move side, you can move the other side, you can move on an angle forward, an angle back to each side. And then from each of those positions, you can do the exact same options and or pivot and or go backwards. So all of a sudden, you start looking at the possible choices that feet have to do in real time in space. So that is footwork. That's what footwork really is what you have the ability to do, what choices you can make, moving your feet and then your body and then your hands. And so just in that area, TJ Dillashaw is better than almost anyone. Maybe Mighty Mouse is the other that you can put on this level. But the options of where you can move and what you can do with your feet moving through space while fighting another person, TJ Dillashaw is either number 1 or number 2.
Wow. So I guess in this situation, he would have, the slight advantage if won over Garbrandt. The other thing also, we noticed obviously Garbrandt dominated, the dominator himself in Dominic Cruz. He did it on the feet, did a spectacular job at UFC 207. And when TJ Dillashaw faced a dangerous striker and obviously John Lineker, he took Lineker to the ground and he nullified his strengths. Do you sort of expect TJ to maybe have a similar approach and try and take Garbrandt out of his comfort zone as opposed to sort of trying to pick him apart on the feet, even though it kind of seems like, according to you, he could do that?
So what Cody was able to do that nobody else had ever done was he just didn't bite on the lies, right? Dominic Cruz just tells you all of these lies. He comes out and says, I'm going to move this way. No, I'm not. When I do this, you should be hesitant. Oh, you're not hesitant anymore? Then I'll do it for real. You know what I mean? He offers you options. He will move his entire body towards you in a way that people were unfamiliar with that either is a threat and you treat it as a threat, or you realize, well, maybe it isn't a threat. And once you're no longer threatened by it, he uses it to hit you. Garbrandt essentially, and then that can freeze you. So you look at the Uriah fights, you see Uriah going, his brain is basically going, I don't know what's a real threat and I don't know what's not a threat. So he starts to freeze a little and then Cruz kind of takes you apart. Garbrandt basically didn't bite on anything. Garbrandt basically looked at Dominic Cruz and said, all of that stuff is irrelevant. I'm not going to have my shoelaces tied together because I think something's a threat. If it turns out to be one and you hit me, you're going to have to be close enough to me for me to hit you back. And that's how Garbrandt approached that fight. That's why he was able to do something to Cruz that nobody's ever seen. It almost seemed like it was a different fighter because Garbrandt treated him like a different fighter. So if TJ and Dwayne and their team looks at that and goes, oh, God, he won't bite on anything, then you just literally have to outplay him. Make better moves than him, have better choices than him. You can't trick him into buying something. You just have to beat him with speed and movement and choices and stuff like that rather than trick his mind. They can still do that. But the problem when you face Garbrandt is there's a number of problems, big problems. One is every one of his shots are dangerous. And the biggest reason why is because he can move his feet in such a way to still to be mobile and deliver power. And that's the trick. That's a hybrid of Cody Garbrandt. There's Lineker is so attached to the ground. The reason he delivers so much power is because he's so attached to the ground. But because he's so attached to the ground, he's less mobile. And then, Cruz is so mobile because he's less attached to the ground. But because he's less attached to the ground, he had less power. So it's the connection between power, attachment to the ground, and mobility. And for some, through small subtleties and talent and, not accepting the limitations, Garbrandt is both mobile and delivers with power. It's really hard to beat. It's really, really hard to beat. In the end, we're getting into territories of looking at, all these minuscule attributes. And if some of these things are true, in the end, what it comes down to is we just fight. I'll have to land more on you than you land on me. And to do that, I'll have to be faster, better, more alert, more focused, and just beat you. Because what if sometimes we're like, who has the better game plan? Well, they both have equally amazing game plans. So what's gonna be the outcome now? Who fucking fights better tonight? Who has the better moments? Who makes the better choices in the micro, in the moments, in the weeds? And that this fight could end up coming down to it. That we have been taught in the way that we've been taught to look at fighting, that someone must have, who had the better game plan? Oh, it's him, therefore he won. Well, no, you had a better game plan, but I'm just way better than you. Your game plan was amazing, but I'm more talented. Like, we look for binary answers. Like somebody asked me the other day, what happened? Is Till that good or is Cowboy aged? It's like, why can both not be true? That and many other variables. It's the aspect of fighting. In the end, all of these things, if you can make many choices when these conversations begin. You can say, I don't care, you're a nerd, and who cares? It's just an amazing fight. And that's a super valid choice as a fan. That's a great choice. Go in there and watch it. It's amazing. Somebody kicked somebody in the head. It's fast. It's exciting. Or you can get super nerdy like this and dig and dig and dig. But if you do that, what you find is you have less answers, not more, because you get in the habit of not thinking. The only way to find deeper and deeper answers is to never think you have the answer, and never stop someplace and go, oh, this guy's got the better footwork, therefore he's the winner. Nah, you can have better footwork, but I have a better mind tonight. You can have better footwork, but your knee gets injured. Your knee gets injured, you can no longer move. On Sunday morning, people will say, well, it turned out Garbrandt's footwork was better. Well, you don't know. This guy's knee's blown out. It's so many things affect so many things. And to me, that's the beauty of it. But for other people, everything I've just said is a whole bunch of nonsense that sounds ridiculous, and I can't imagine why anybody would care. And somewhere in the middle is the average one of us who just loves watching fighting for the reasons we love watching fighting.
Yeah, and we want to get your thoughts on Joanna and Rose, but before we move on, one of those X factors that we were considering going into this fight is just the mental state of both fighters. We saw what happened on The Ultimate Fighter. Cody, did seem like he got emotional rather easily at a few times, lost his temper a number of times. TJ looks like mentally he's very, very strong going into this fight, but I mean, this rivalry between TJ and Team Alpha Male has been going for quite some time. It's really difficult to tell who's going to be affected more when the fight goes down. But do you anticipate that the mental state of one of the fighters may be a factor in this fight, depending on how it goes down during fight week, media week, and then also that night of the fight?
You know what I find really interesting about Garbrandt is he seems to be exactly what he seems to be. Do you know what I mean? He's kind of emotional. He's kind of wound up. He's hyper-aggressive. He flies off the handle, very reactionary. And that's how he seems when you see him on camera. That's how he seems a little when you just chat with him in person. And that's how he seems in conflict. And that's how he seems when he fights. And it's all super congruent. You know what I mean? And it kind of works for him. It'd almost be weird if he wasn't emotional enough, or if he became very cold and calculating. Would that work for him? Because so far, that authenticity of him being a wound up, emotional, quote, kid. He's a man, but he's a kid in some ways. And that seems to really work for him. So if they were to both be emotional and both be wound up and make this about, hatred and all that kind of stuff, you would think it served him better. Because Dillashaw, on the other hand, is very much, an athlete, running plays, going out, getting fit, becoming a strong machine, and then going out and executing. And that is harder to do when you're all wound up. So if I'm Garbrandt, I want to make this an emotional thing. But there's one other element to that, and that is if I fail to make it emotional, I can't see that as a failure. You see, if I can get TJ off his game, I see that as a benefit, but I don't live and die by it. If TJ is cold and calculating and I can't shake him, well, no big deal. We still fight. And I think the same exact dynamic is in play with Rose and Joanna, because she's trying to shake Rose and it's not working. So no big deal. You want to look at it like, I would love it. Wouldn't it be great if I could undermine you psychologically a little bit? But if I can't, no problem. I still think I'm also the better fighter. And that's how Jedrzejczyk has to look at this too, because doesn't seem to be shaking Rose. Even, questioning her stability and questioning her confidence and her psychological makeup isn't getting a reaction. So no big deal. You just let that go and you carry on and you fight.
And it's crazy with this fight with Rose and Joanna. I mean, at this point, with Joanna being so dominant in the division, it's kind of hard to pick against her these days. And it wasn't that long ago that Rose lost to Karolina Kowalkiewicz, but nevertheless, obviously, Rose and Joanna, it's a fight that people have wanted to see for a really long time now. When you look at this, do you think Rose brings anything different that Joanna's past opponents haven't, as far as a serious challenge, as far as serious threats? And stylistically, how do you think, Rose matches up against Joanna, Robin?
It's so hard, because when you look at what Joanna's been, being more complete would be the answer you try to look for. Like being more, well-rounded was the term of the last decade that we used. Whatever term we use now, complete, well-rounded, however you want to put it, to be a threat everywhere would be probably, in theory, your best bet. because we've seen Joanna try to fight somebody who's the best wrestler that she's faced, Carla Esparza. That's not going to cut it. We've seen her try to fight people who can strike, and Kavakevich is very complete, or as complete as anyone we've seen Joanna face. And she lost a round or two against Carolina and got beat up a little bit. So complete and be there for the whole fight. The best performance we've seen against her was Carolina Kavakevich, and that's what she is. More complete and more psychologically and physiologically able to be there late in the fight. So that's what Rose needs. That's the blueprint that has had the best success so far. And Rose has some of those things. She's dangerous as a kickboxer. She's dangerous as a grappler. But you do want to get to the body lock on Joanna. You don't want to just dive in on her hips. She drives you into the ground, smashes your face against the mat, and beats the crap out of you. That's not working. So you got to go against the fence or body lock or work through little tangled trips against her. And she knows that too, and anybody who trains her knows that, so they will have been working on that. So it's going to be hard to beat her. But this is possible. Rose can win this fight. But I'm not going to put money on that. But I think she seems strongest psychologically. She understands how to get a performance out of herself now. I think she's publicly talked about the fact that she has been seen as, and she's seen herself as, hit hot and cold. And once you acknowledge that yourself, you can do something about it. That's not just true of fighting. That's life, man. If you say, I'm a bad driver, I really am, I'm a bad driver, well, now you'll start becoming a better driver. If you're a bad driver and you say, I'm fine, everybody else sucks, you're not going to get any better at that. So acknowledging it yourself is a big, good sign, and Rose is doing that.
Wow, you're just getting me excited for the fight, Robin. There's so many great fights, so many different outcomes that could happen. But, of course, the main event between GSP and Bisping is something that fans have been sort of looking forward to for a long time. We didn't know it was going to happen. Then we realized it was going to happen. Then we thought it wasn't going to happen. Now it's happening. Who knows? Maybe things will change before fight week. But I know you've been spending quite some time up there at TriStar, and you've trained around George and been around George before. What does he seem like going into this fight to you?
Well, if I didn't know George, I would say this guy seems scared. This guy seems uncomfortable. This guy seems stressed. And, this guy seems under duress. And I'd be worried. The only thing is George has been like that for every fight he's ever had. George has been like, as the champion, facing the best fighters, defending his title, chasing his title, rematches, every single, Jake Shields, and Koscheck and everyone. He's always been this way. He got a little better at talking in public in front of a camera, but he's out of practice with that. So he seems even more uncomfortable. But he's not out of practice with being a martial artist. He never left the gym those entire 4 years. So I'd be worried if this is my only exposure to George. I'd be like, oh my God, this guy's terrified. But since I know that, he's always been that way. George, the greatest fighter in the world, certainly one of them, and if he wins this one, it'll be hard to argue that he is the greatest fighter ever. He's been terrified leading into every fight he's ever had. So, and that's, I followed him for months. We have a documentary coming out on TSN here in Canada. TSN is the Canadian ESPN, for lack of a better way to put it. And the biggest reveal that I found was how human George is. He's not a robot. He's not a machine. He's not great, better than all of us somehow. He's very, very human. But that's not anything new. He will go into this scared, as he always has, and he'll probably perform really, really well, as he always has.
I think the thing that people find really interesting about the situation is the comments that he said about if he loses the fight, it looks like he'll walk away from the sport. Did you get a chance to sort of learn more about his thoughts behind that? Is it more about the fact that he doesn't want to stick around and sort of be a punching bag, or is there anything more to that we're not really seeing, and it's not really meeting the eye at the moment?
I think the thing that seems so strange when you hear George speak is the fact that he's telling the truth and 97% of them are not. You know what I mean? So if he's thinking, man, if I lose this fight, I'm out. A lot of other guys think that. They just don't say it. If he's thinking, I don't know what'll happen, or I don't know if I can beat that guy, or, I'm feeling a lot of pressure and stress, they're all feeling that. He's just weirdly blunter, and the reason he's blunter is because he's more honest with himself. These are the things that make him a little more special is he's looking for failures and flaws and weaknesses, and when he finds them, he's overjoyed. That's why he's so good, because he'll obsess about the weakness until it's no longer a weakness. And it's honesty that makes that possible. So what you're seeing is you're seeing a very honest professional fighter in a world where you don't see any honest ones. And if I speak to them or talk to them and said that to them, some of them would be like, hey, I'm honest, bro. But they're not really. They see and understand that these moments that they get to interface with the world through websites and radio and television are not moments to tell the truth. They're moments to tell the story you need told, whether that's to sell tickets or to get people excited or to mislead your opponent. There's many, many reasons. So with George, he's just telling you the truth. And it seems weird because you're not used to hearing the truth.
And I think that's why this fight's going to be so interesting, because we're really going to see what George is made of, at least, not necessarily the George that we're used to, but at least George St-Pierre in 2017, a little bit older, a little bit, I guess, more experienced in some ways, because it was actually George, he was the first guy that I heard say this, where, you don't really learn a lot in training camp. It's out of training camp that you learn a lot. I believe he described it as playing, experimenting, outside of camp and just seeing what works, seeing what doesn't. And I guess one of the advantages, if you could say that, is that he's had 4 years to sort of play and experiment and sort of, try out different things, out of camps, but in training sessions. And so maybe we will see, a very different George St-Pierre. But the other thing is his style so much revolves around speed and timing and explosiveness. Robin, do you still think that all of those attributes will be there after being away for so long? Because we know in this game, we saw it happen to Lyoto Machida. We've seen it happen to so many guys who rely on that speed and timing. Once that's gone, a huge part of their success disappears. So what are you expecting in that sense?
Yeah, it's definitely not gone, because I watched him for hours and hours and hours. I got beaten up by him and grappling and kicked and punched by him lightly, fortunately.
Yeah.
He's a very safe training partner, very, very safe, which is why they like him anywhere he goes, because you can trust him. He has incredible control. But those things are there. I've seen them over and over and over again. But they're in the reality of a pressure-filled, aggressive fight is very different. So he's got that rhythm and that comfort level sparring with Rory McDonald or whatever. But if I'm Michael Bisping, I am coming at that guy aggressive like crazy in those first couple minutes and make it feel very different than every one of those training sessions over the last 4 years, and make his mind go, oh, my God, yes, I do hate this. Why am I doing this? And he's a human being. I mean, we have strange reactions when we see human beings, fail or fold in a fight, even though 99.99999% of all humanity does it. But they're humans. And if I'm Mike, I'm trying to remind that guy of how human he is, and I'm trying to really put it on him in the first half of that first round. And if he does, it'll feel super unfamiliar to George.
Well, we know you don't like to give predictions, Robin, but as we wrap up the show, we have to find out, who are you leaning towards in this fight? Because there's a lot of different aspects going into it, the size difference, the return for GSP, Michael Bisping, where he's at in his career. A lot of people trying to figure out who's going to come out on top in this one. At the moment, as we go into fight week, who are you leaning towards in this main event?
Well, the unknown of Mike, seeing 20 training sessions of George and training with him and studying him in person, all that told me is how little I really know about Michael Bisping, and truthfully how little we know about every one of these fighters. When you see what you see in day to day, watching them up close, you realize we see very little. So Mike, to me, as much as I've studied him and done many breakdowns of him and stuff, I've just realized how little I know about him, and the unknown is scary. And this will change. When I'm talking to you, we're still days out. It'll change as I see different moments. But even that, those are human biases. But truthfully, if I was unbiased and I was standing back and I wasn't close with George and I hadn't just spent all this time with him and I didn't see him, I would be leaning towards Michael Bisping. I really would. But I am close with George, and I have seen him, and I have been spending time with him at times, basically as part of his team. So I got to go with George. But that's me cheering, whereas the other way was me thinking, that guy's too big, too strong, too tough, too scary, and too unbreakable. And I don't know if George is able to handle that. But even having said that, he may be. So I'm going with George as a friend. But if I wasn't close, I'd be leaning towards Bisping, that's for sure.
Well, Robin, we appreciate your time. Thank you so much for coming on. Guys, make sure to check out Robin Black December 17th at Park Theatre in Winnipeg, Canada. Get your tickets now. Jump on the Twitter page at Robin Black MMA. He's got all the links up there. Of course, his YouTube page is phenomenal. Make sure to follow that. And some big projects coming out, like this big GSP project coming out on TSN in Canada, which we can't wait to watch as well, Robin. So thank you so much for your time, and excited for the fights this weekend. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, me too, my friend. Enjoy the hostilities, boys.
Hey, this is Ariel Helwani, and you're listening to Submission Radio with my two favorite mates, Dennis and Casper.
What's up, fight fans? Tommy Told here with UFC 217's main eventer, George St-Pierre. George, welcome back. It feels very good to be back, I think. Maybe. If Michael Bisping beat my face in all over the cage, it will not have been a good time, but we will see, I guess. George, how did you prep for this comeback? Well, first I go get some NUS Active Energy that I buy with my money. Then after that, I start my train for Michael, which consists of be bigger than Michael and take Michael down. George, what do you say to those people who feel like that style is a cop-out? Well, to those people, I say MMA is very much like the stock market, you see. Let's not, George. Let's not. Okay, but what am I supposed to do? Stand there like a sock rock robot and let him hit me in the head for the fans? Do you know how many times Johnny Hendricks hit me in the head? Guys, my brain cannot take much more of that. Wrestling is just as much a part of MMA as striking. I am sorry to the ignorant fools who don't understand this. Tommy, whoever say in American football, when they go against Tom Brady, when they play Tom Brady, they say, let's just play in such a way that Tom Brady is most likely to win. Do you see how that doesn't make sense? Are people crazy inside their head sometimes? The people who tell me to stand and trade with Michael Bisping have probably never even won a game of checkers. This is the type of fight that I do. If you are not impressed by my performance, in the words of Matt Hughes, well, that's your opinion. It stinks, but it's your opinion. What's next for you after this fight, George? Well, after I clearly win because of my incredible takedown abilities, I will fight Conor McGregor for the middleweight title, I think. That fight make the most sense for the fans, and I'm pretty sure I can take Conor down with ease, so we're good to go there, too. I have broken MMA, you guys. I'm so good at a thing that I have ruined every fight with me. But nonetheless, enjoy the show this weekend, Tommy. And look for me to return in Captain America 4 as Balrog the Leaper. They're not doing a Captain America 4, George, and I'm pretty sure your character's dead or in jail or something. We shall see about this. Captain America's takedown defense is suspect. Thanks for the interview. Back to you guys.
Hey, this is Jimmy Manuel. You listen to Submission Radio.
All right, guys. Our next guest is a former Strikeforce middleweight champion, currently fighting in the PFL. He is coming off a big Brazilian jiu-jitsu win over Great Murillo Santana, a fight to win Pro 51. He also helped GSP prepare for his big fight against Michael Bisping this weekend. A member of the world-renowned Scrap Pack. It's a pleasure to welcome our old friend Jake Shields back to Submission Radio. Jake, it's felt like forever. Welcome back to the program.
Yeah, thank you, man. Thank you. Yeah, it's been staying busy, I guess.
You are a busy man. A lot going on in the world of Jake Shields. It is great to have you back on the program. Congratulations on the win over Santana at Fight to Win Pro. It was a very close fight. Now that it's been a little bit of time since the win, what did you think of the contest?
Yeah, I think Milo Santana is actually one of those guys that's really good. Maybe not as big a name how talented he is. It was the match was a lot closer than I wanted. You know, I wanted to go out there and obviously get a submission, but Santana being such a tight, tough guy, he had a really good close guard. I got stuck in the close guard most of the match, which kind of sucked, you know, and it would obviously a lot more to happen. But, luckily I was go out there and get the win at least.
You know, it's funny because you're an accomplished fighter in MMA, but you've been really dominating the competitive grappling world for quite some time. Tell me, what is it about the competitive Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu scene that just keeps you coming back? Because I know a lot of people, they've had a taste of it, and it's not their style.
Yeah, I like it. You know, I've always loved jiu-jitsu. Like, I like all the martial arts, but jiu-jitsu is always been my favorite. And it's now these pro shows are popping up everywhere. You can go out and make a little money and grapple, stay busy with competing. It's I still love MMA, but there's only I only want to fight a couple times a year. Going out and getting punched, it's a serious business. It's stressful. It's a lot going on when you fight. But to me, grappling is more just like fun, relaxing. I don't have the stress, and I'm still getting to go and compete and make a little money.
Going by what you just said, I feel like I kind of know the answer to this one, but what do you enjoy training for more? You know, BJJ comps or MMA fights?
Probably BJJ as well, but I don't know. I like training for MMA. It's just sometimes you get a little beat up because you're having to do all that sparring, and there's times where it's like, oh man, I'm so sore. it's still a sore training for the jiu-jitsu, but it's not quite the same. You're not getting punched in the face at least.
And of course, you trained with Team Renzo Gracie, which features the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu genius John Danaher, Beast Gary Tonin, and countless others. What's it like training in a room full of such Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu talent? And when you're in a room with so much skill, what's the rolling like?
Oh, it's great because, he said these guys are the best of the best. You have, led by John, he's truly a jiu-jitsu genius. He's always coming up with innovative and new techniques and always trying to push us to expand. But then you also have a room full of tough guys. Obviously Gary, Gordon, those guys are successful, but then there's a bunch of other good guys underneath. So you're constantly, you're brainstorming new ideas, good techniques, picking into the brain. And then, the live sessions get pretty intense as well. There's luckily everyone's not quite as good as those guys. So you can grab an easy round here or there, but usually there, an easy round is still like a good brown belt. Like, oh, I need to take an easier round. And you look around, the easiest guy you can see is a brown belt. So you're like, well, I guess I'm going with him.
That's so funny because this is something that Dennis and I would do. We'd look for the easy guy and then, get that ego boost. But you, the great Jake Shields, even you do that from time to time.
Well, you don't want to always be battling every single round.
Course.
I think that's a mistake a lot of people make, and a mistake I've made in my past. Even like John was like, even he said, you don't want every round to be going with Gordon and Gary and the best guys battling. Sometimes it's good to grab these new guys and try to, because we're working new techniques. I'm not going to go try a new technique and then go and execute it on Gordon or something I just learned. So it's like sometimes I grab the other guys, and that's when you try your new moves and learn and expand. So I try to, I actually try to spend about half my time going with guys that are really pushing me and like half guys where I can kind of play around and try new things.
It just reminds me of when I used to train Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and I got beat up by the blue belts. So then I'd look for white belts that have never rolled before in their life. And then they'd beat me as well. Anyway, let's move on. Just quickly on Tone, and we know he's making his move to MMA with one. Did he approach you for any advice, and how far do you think he can go in this transition to MMA?
Gary?
Yeah.
We're always, brainstorming things, but like he's coached by John. But I'm sure he'll be using a lot when he transfers over. But I think he can go all the way. Gary's he's not switching to MMA to do it half-ass. He's already making I don't know what he makes, but I imagine he's making a very comfortable living in MMA. He has a successful school. He does seminars. He makes money with these tournaments. So he's not switching over because he needs the money. He's switching over. He could easily just do a life of jiu-jitsu and make, I'm sure high six figures a year. But he wants to fight to be the best. And, he has some of the best work ethic I've ever seen. The guy's in there, 7 a.m. every day, then again at noon, and then, he goes over and teaches all day at night and, hits pads in between work. So with his work ethic, I think he can go to the top.
Wow.
Obviously it's going to take, it's going to take a little bit. He shouldn't jump in and try to fight the best of the best his first couple fights. He's probably built up, his experience still is still really important, but you give him a couple years to build and fight the right people. I think he can be fighting world champions.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously another man training with the team is your former opponent, GSP, who you've helped leading into this fight against Michael Bisping, UFC 217. Was it a bit weird actually working with George after your rivalry, going back from UFC 129?
It actually wasn't, because George is the guy I've always respected. He's one of the few guys that, looked up. I've hung out with him a couple times after the fight, ranch with in Vegas. So we've been out and hung out together. And then me having, moved to New York, I've been training with John. John's been training with George for years. So it kind of, George came by the gym in New York. So, I talked to him there. We had a couple light workouts first. So it wasn't, we'd already worked out together a few times before me going up there. So it didn't seem weird at all.
Did you hear how Michael Bisping was actually considering to bring you in as well? You're a hot commodity, Jake Shields. Everybody wants to bring you on board.
Yeah, no, it was funny. He actually, Bisping's a friend of mine. He wrote me on Twitter, like, oh, you want to come by? And I'm just like, it makes sense for the style matchup, but I had to be like, oh, sorry, I like Michael, but, being here with, being here training under John, I guess, Bisping didn't realize I was out here. So obviously, if I'm training under the guy who trains George, can't go out and do that.
How did he take it? Because, obviously, I don't know, Michael, we don't know him like you do, but I feel like he's one of those guys that's all about kind of like loyalty. Did he bust your balls a little bit? Like, oh, come on, you're working with that guy, not me?
Yeah, I didn't really talk to him after that, so I don't know. So as far he might hate me now, but as far as I know, we're still cool. We've never been like great friends, but I've always liked Michael. Got along. He's one of the. A lot of people don't like Michael. I know a lot of people have had trouble with him. I've personally never had any issues with him. So as far as I know, we're still cool.
Yeah, just buy him a beer.
But you never know. He's one of those guys. He's one of those guys that sets off pretty easy too. I know a lot of people have had issues with him and don't like him, but personally, I never had any issues.
The key is buying him alcohol, Jake. Not too much alcohol, just enough for him to love you again. But let's quickly talk about training.
Just give him a shot.
Yeah, just give him a shot, but not too many shots because then he might get a bit aggressive. But anyway,
yeah.
Let's talk about GSP because, you had previously fought him before, so you would have had a gauge of his skills. But having trained with him now and sort of seeing what he can do, did it give you a different perspective of how good of a grappler he really is?
I've always thought he was a great grappler. So no, I think he's always been a top jiu-jitsu guy. Having trained with John, I knew he was great wrestling, so I knew he was a great grappler. And having trained with him, he's what I expected. Really good, great passing, strong, talented. So he's I've always looked at him as one of the best fighters of all time, and still do.
Do you find that, I'm not sure if you were able to gauge this, but did you find him to be better than in the past? Because that's kind of one of the notions, the theories that, even though George has been on the sidelines, he's been training, potentially experimenting, maybe, expanding his arsenal. Did you find him to be different than back in the day when you guys fought?
Yeah, no, I think he is improving. He's a martial artist, so he's always trying to grow. He wasn't just, took whatever it took. Well, he didn't take 4 years and just party and film movies and cruise around. He was still training pretty much every day. He was coming to New York. I think he was going out and working boxing as well. I know he had a guy from Toronto, a really good boxer, Jorge, who was working with him as well. So he was constantly learning and expanding new skills. So definitely. Plus, he's bigger now. He probably put on 10 pounds of muscle. He's still going to be smaller than Bisping, but he has that extra weight, which should help.
Because that is the big question going into UFC 217. How does he do after this huge break against a guy like Michael Bisping, who is bigger and has very good grappling abilities himself? Do you think the weight and the time away is going to be an issue in your opinion?
I'm training with George up, so I'm going to pick George. I think George is going to win the fight, but it's a tough fight. I'm training with Bisping as well, and guys underestimate him. I don't know why everyone always underestimates Bisping. He's, I guess he doesn't have a lot of single punch KO power. He doesn't have a lot of these fast submissions, but he's strong, in shape, and he wears people down. He just keeps coming and he breaks you. So if George has a hard time taking him down and keep him down, it could be a tough fight.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, the explosiveness is another big question. Will GSP still have it? He had that ACL surgery sort of somewhere in between in his layoff. If he does choose to take Bisping down, do you think he'll be able to do it? And do you think he'll be able to sort of keep him down and do it over 25 minutes?
Yeah, that's the exciting part about the fight right there. That's where everyone wants to see it. To be this fight, I'm super pumped to watch. I've trained with both these guys. It's super exciting. Will he be able to? When he hits his shot though, and his timing's on, he has probably the best shot in the sport. He just blasts through it, it's down. He's also really hard to get up on. But as you've seen, if you watch a lot of this thing's fight, he's really hard to keep down. So it's going to be exciting to see what happens. I think if he's got it, he's clicking again in training. But as long as he doesn't go out there. It's different between training and fighting. Like I said, there's a long time for a layoff. So can he put his nerves? Can he relax and go out there and do it in the cage against Bisping, who's really confident right now?
Mm-hmm. And while we're having a little bit of fun, it looks like if he wins, people are sort of expecting him to possibly fight Conor McGregor soon. How do you think GSP goes against a guy well in Conor McGregor? Do you think that's an easy fight for GSP?
Yeah, I think it's a really bad matchup for Conor. I think GSP is possibly the worst matchup for him because the way he hits his shots, he can cover so much distance. And he's really hard to get up on. So I think that'd be a really bad fight for Conor. But, you never know. Anything can happen in these fights. Conor has that. He does have that one-punch knockout power.
Yeah, of course. He's always dangerous. And just quickly on McGregor before we get off that topic, we know your good friend, training partner Nate Diaz still looks like a strong candidate for a third fight with McGregor. Everything's up in the air. Do you believe it happens? And how does a third fight go in your opinion, Jake?
I think it'll happen at some point. I don't know if it's going to be the next fight or not, but I think the fans are always going to want to see that fight, even if it ever happens. Even if McGregor loses, wins, I think people are always going to want to see Diaz and Conor 3. I certainly do, and I imagine you do as well. I think everyone I talk to wants to see that fight. So it'll happen at some point, and I think Nate's going to win. I think it'll, like the first one, he ran through him. I think the second one, like I said, Conor's got that power, so anything can happen. But I think Nate's got him figured out to go out there and beat him.
Mm-hmm. And of course, as the man, that's dominating Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu competitions right now, the big question right now is if Tony Ferguson was the guy who fought McGregor, will his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu pose a threat to beating McGregor? Do you think that's enough if those two end up fighting?
It's an interesting fight as well. Like you said, it's hard to predict these fights. I hate going out there and predicting these fights because you never know till they fight. That's why they do it. But I think I'd pick Conor on that fight. I think the way Ferguson fights kind of puts his chin up. He has okay takedowns, but not crazy good takedowns. Good jiu-jitsu, so he definitely could catch Conor, but I think Conor might be able to survive, get back to his feet, and put him down with his power.
It'll be another fun one. All right, let's go back to you, Jake, as we let you go soon. We know you obviously coming off that win in July in the newly renamed PFL. How do you like the change from World Series of Fighting to the PFL so far? How are you sort of finding that?
Honestly, for me, it seemed pretty much the same so far.
Yeah.
It's like all working most of the same people. So not like really the name change, but it seemed the same. I mean, the way it sounds like it's going to be good with the tournament they're doing, be paying good. So they're hiring new people, new execs. So it's supposed to be a positive change, but you never really know till things go through. And the first show is pretty much identical. So I'm just waiting to see what happens next.
I was just going to say, it kind of sounds like you sort of, you haven't really based your opinion yet. You're sort of seeing how things play out. I know in the past, a lot of fighters with World Series of Fighting, the main gripe was just not getting enough fights or getting fights when they wanted them. How are you finding that in at the moment? And is that something you're sort of waiting to see how it plays out? And,
overall, they fought me usually pretty close to when I wanted to fight. I've been waiting here or there. But right now, I'm ready to fight again and waiting to hear if this tournament's actually happening in January or not. I heard rumors maybe pushed back a month or two, and it's like I'm a little older and don't have long to fight, so I want to hurry up to get out there. So I'm hoping they get moving and fight me. But overall, they treated me good. So I'm not going to knock the show. They've always treated me good, paid well, and fought me when I wanted. It's just I'm ready to fight again. So I'm hoping I'll get held off.
Mm-hmm. And we imagine everywhere you go, people still bringing up the fact that you hold wins over the top fighters in the UFC welterweight division. And, having worked with guys like GSP and obviously your good friend Nate Diaz, have you gotten more of an urge to maybe circle your way back to the UFC anytime soon, especially with the welterweight division being, I suppose, more exciting than ever? There's a whole bunch of great fighters in there now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really think about that much, but I would go back there. I think, I'm improving again. I'm learning a bunch of new stuff, and I feel like I keep getting older. I feel like I'm getting better and better, and I would love to go out and fight it. I've already beaten a lot of the top UFC guys, and there's some new guys that are looking pretty good out there that I'd like to fight as well. Just curious, who are those guys? Who's someone that sort of caught your eye and you've watched fight and you're like, wow, that could be a fun matchup. That could be a fun fight. The guy Damian Maia seems like a fun guy. He's going out there. He's winning big fights, talking shit. I don't know too much about him, but he's had a big win with Maia, and that would be an interesting fight. What's his name? Corey Colby Covington. I don't even know. Colby. Yeah, I just saw him the first time, and I saw him talking to him on Twitter. I'm like, oh, this guy looks like a fun guy to fight. Did you see what he said after the win to the Brazilian crowd? Called them filthy animals. It was like a Chael Sonnen situation. They had to rush him out with security. Oh, yeah, it was crazy. I think it was great because first I like Brazil, but I understand why he do it. Because you fight down there, they literally start chanting, "You will die." Yeah. And everyone freaks out when you fire back. It's like, well, I mean, these guys are telling us we're going to die. Why can't we fire back at them? Yeah. I feel like this is a guy that dish it out, they should be able to take it. I feel like this is a guy that if he gets out of line, he might get a coffee in the face from Jake Shields. Am I right? Oh yeah. Like I said, I respect him as a fighter, but if he mouths off, I'd fight him for real in a second. He seems like the kind of guy that'd probably be the same, so it might be fun. I'm wondering if Darren Till popped up on your radar, Jake, because he's a guy who people are talking about maybe being, sort of like the future. Obviously, welterweight's super exciting. He's talking about, one day moving up all the way to light heavyweight. Is he a guy that's caught your eye? Yeah, I know. That's a good new guy as well. Yeah, these guys coming out, Knockdown Cowboy, these guys kind of coming out. Some of these new young guns all of a sudden started coming out of nowhere with some big wins. And it's like, I always like to fight guys that are good, These guys are going out and proving themselves. So, of course, it's also nice, being older, I want to feel I can still go beat these top young guns. I feel like everybody... I've been doing it in grappling. Yeah, I've been doing a lot of grappling lately, beating the top young guns. So next, go back to MMA and start doing it. I feel like this new injection of guys in welterweight, guys like RDA, Jorge Masvidal, just a whole bunch of guys, makes people really excited to possibly see you return there. And we know you've been dominating MMA for a really long time. You're a father, and obviously you compete in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and dominating at the moment. But have you, being 38 years old, with your body going through what it's gone through with all the training sessions, have you thought about in general how much longer you'd like to keep fighting and how much longer you'd like to stay in the sport of MMA? Yeah, no, of course. Like I said, I'm getting a little older, so you think, I don't want to over push this, But right now, I still enjoy the sport, and I don't feel like I'm slowing down to getting old. I'm definitely paying attention to my body now. If I start feeling like I'm slowing down, I do want to retire. Luckily, I'm in a situation, where financially I should be. We always want our money, but financially I'm pretty set, so I can walk away. So I don't want to be out there getting beat up. My body's not at that level, but I feel like I got at least another year or two. But I just take it one fight at a time right now and see what happens.
And I was just going to say, that's actually pretty rare, right? Because there's a lot of, like, anytime you hear anything about fighter pay, fighters and money and things like that, it's always the horror stories, how much, fighters have to go back to full-time work. But you're, I guess, in the rare boat where you just said that if you were to walk away, you're almost at that point where you pretty much set. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think maybe I got lucky with getting paid pretty good from the early shows with the Strike Force, and I got a good contract with UFC, and I think sometimes guys are making more money than people think too. There's a lot of backdoor money if you're smart. A lot of other businesses, things you can be doing, and plus I was investing money and putting money away and making the right investments. And I think if they're smart in the sport, you can make a lot more money than people think. And the only guys who are making the crazy millions are the champs. But I think even like guys that are fighting for titles and close to that level, some of these guys are making pretty good money. I think some of these guys aren't smart with their money.
That's right. Jake Shields is a drug dealer on the side. Nobody knew. No, I'm kidding. It's great to hear, Jake, that things are working out. And look, as we let you go, because we really appreciate the time, you've been very, very kind. I know you're a very busy guy. We want to kind of get your official prediction for this big fight between GSP and Bisping. I know you're not a big fan of the predictions, but if Jake Shields had to put his, his savings on it, which way would you go?
I'll go with GSP, I guess, by decision. I think it's going to be a tough fight, but I think GSP, I think he's definitely has a wrestling advantage. I think on the stand-up, they're pretty even. I think Bisping may be a little more high volume and conditioned, where he holds the advantage in the size. But overall, I think GSP is just so talented, he'll find a way to win.
And just to follow up on that, you mentioned the size. Obviously, you training with both of them. Who did you find to be stronger, Jake, even though Bisping is the bigger man?
I think George is definitely as strong as Bisping, but Bisping has a little more size. He kind of makes it a little, for instance, hard to hold someone down. There's awkward taking them down just to the size, even though they're not quite that same. George might be a little stronger because of the way he's built, but It's just still different when you actually have that size. His frame's naturally bigger, which you'll feel that when you're in a big fight. Bisping could easily be a 205 pounder, and George could probably drop to 55 if he wanted. So just naturally, he's a bigger guy.
Wow. Well, guys, make sure to follow Jake in the meantime on Twitter at Jake Shields, AJJ, and Instagram at Jake Shields. Jake, thank you so much for jumping on the program. We really appreciate the time. We can't wait to see what happens next, man. We want to see what's happening next in the world of MMA, so we'll have to get you back on when that happens. Thanks again, my friend.
Cool, man. Sounds good. All right. Good talking to you.
Thanks, Jake. Bye.
Hey, guys. This is Brian Stan. You're listening to Submission Radio.
All right, guys. Our next guest is a former UFC title challenger who now does a fantastic job commentating for the UFC, as well as doing interviews and also giving brilliant analysis. One of the brightest and most insightful minds in the sport. He is the outlaw himself, Dan Hardy. Dan, welcome to Submission Radio. It's an honor to finally have you on. How are you?
I'm good. How are you guys?
We're very well. Now, setting the scene here, Dan, it's about 9:30 in the morning, but you're actually joining us from London, I believe, or it's around 10:30 p.m. So you got to tell us, are you normally up at this time, or are you just missing out on a bit of sleep because of Submission Radio? Because we're very sorry for that.
Oh no, I live on a US pay-per-view schedule, so I'm usually up. The main card starts at 3 a.m. UK time normally, so I'm up throughout the night a lot of the time. I actually have another interview in a couple of hours time, so it'll be a late one for me tonight, but I don't mind.
Wow. So you're a madman. You're eating breakfast when most people are going to sleep. Just curious, what are you normally doing at this time? 10:30 p.m., most people are hitting the sack. What's Dan Hardy up to? What's the schedule look like?
I usually like to train around this time. I usually get a training session sometime around 11 to midnight, and then that keeps me awake throughout the fight cards. Often I'm sitting researching. I'm catching up on Eddie Bravo Invitational or Glory or whatever's on Flow Grappling or Box Nation. I'm just watching combat sports most of the time.
How does this affect the personal life? Because we imagine if you're trying to get someone to go on a date with you and you go, hey, I wake up around 10:30. Should we grab a coffee around 1:30, 2 a.m. in the morning? How does that work? Does that work out? Do they go with it? Or do you have to just not sleep? Or how does it all work out for you?
Yeah, no, I just kind of have a very unusual lifestyle. So anybody that lives in or around me kind of understands and kind of puts up with me, I guess, is the best way of putting it.
Very nice. Well, we don't have too much time with you, Dan, so we'll get straight into it. Obviously, the reason we brought you on is your fantastic analysis, and we want to talk UFC 217, specifically the main event, and what better way to get into it than take a trip back in time when you yourself fought GSP. You obviously went into that fight, confident, fully prepared, and with a game plan, just like Michael Bisping will this weekend. What would you say surprised you most about George once you were actually in there with him?
I think it was just his timing. I felt like I would be able to at least anticipate when he was thinking about level changing, but he was so quick. And the other thing as well is once he's got his hands on you, he's very good at chaining his takedowns together. So, you stuff the first one and he's immediately started the second stage of the takedown. And, he has 4, 5, 6 options that he can bolt onto the end of it. So that was the thing that surprised me most. And then obviously that affects you in a negative way, because then you're thinking, okay, I've probably got, maybe 1 or 2 punches before he tries to get a hold of me. So then you start holding back and hesitating, and that starts to get very frustrating.
Is this one of the things that you're most curious about in terms of GSP and what he looks like, and that's the timing? Because obviously, when people think about this and him being away for 4 years, a lot of people think, well, cage rust may be a factor, and how's that going to affect his timing, especially against a guy like Michael Bisping, who throws a lot of volume, not to mention, the added weight that he's not really used to carrying. What are your thoughts on that, Dan, and what are you sort of expecting from GSP?
Well, yeah, the weight and the size is the main thing I'm thinking about, and obviously, the work rate of Michael Bisping. He's got such a good gas tank, and he's so good at scrambling back to his feet. I don't think that GSP is going to struggle taking Bisping down at least a couple of times in the first round. I think the issue is holding Bisping down and having the gas tank to support that kind of game plan. Trying to control Michael over 25 minutes is going to be incredibly difficult. I think Michael's going to be a bit more intelligent about his footwork as well. I mean, I was moving straight forward and onto his takedowns. I think Michael will be a bit less aggressive with his attack. I think he'll use more counter striking and try and get GSP to come to him a little bit, because if you start rushing forward, that's when your level changes. And even though I think GSP will be able to get him down, it's that constant grind of getting back to his feet and then, putting the pressure on GSP when they're on the feet. I think that's where GSP struggles in this one.
And I mean, aside from fighting with Bisping, you've also had the pleasure of fighting with GSP. What am I talking about? Fighting with GSP, you've also had the pleasure of training with Bisping in the past. How would you rate both of their stand-up skills, and who do you think has the edge here? Can GSP win a kickboxing match if he needs to against Bisping, who has, great footwork and has, really impressed in the past?
I think if GSP's going to beat Bisping on the feet, I think he's going to have to have improved that part of his game. Obviously, he's brought Freddie Roach in, and we don't know what kind of benefit that is going to have. But I certainly think that he needs to show more than he did in the previous part of his career, because it was very much restricted to single punches, a basic 1-2, and then he used the Superman jab low kick quite a lot. And towards the end of his career, there was less and less variety in his attack, because he fought safer and safer, because he was fighting, the best guys every time he fought. Whereas Bisping, on the other hand, has got a real variety of striking. He's very good at throwing long combinations and attacking various different targets with the same, with the same attack. So I think on the feet, as well as Bisping being the bigger man, I think he's going to be able to push George. I think George has to rely on his wrestling at least to tie Bisping up and slow him down.
It's interesting that you mentioned Freddie Roach, because this is kind of the other big question here as well. Obviously, Freddie Roach, a super accomplished trainer when it comes to boxing, a genius when it comes to boxing, and has worked with George for quite some time. But there's also the factor there that MMA is very different to boxing. There's a lot of factors to MMA that maybe Freddie doesn't quite understand quite like he does in boxing. Do you think it is a benefit having him in the corner there? Do you think it could maybe be a little bit of a detriment as well?
I certainly think it's an interesting choice. George has always had a real power team in his corner, what with, Faraz and Greg Jackson and Phil Nurse and John Danaher. But interestingly, John Danaher said something the other day in the documentary that the UFC have put out recently about George and his comeback. And he talks about how, although obviously he always had the best coaches around him and they always brought a lot of information to the table, it was George that put it all together. So, I'm sure he's been taught a lot of stuff that wasn't applicable to mixed martial arts in the past, and he's kind of shed what he didn't need and taken what works for him. It's exactly what Bruce Lee said: absorb what is useful and reject what's useless. I'm sure that there is a part of that going on with George and Freddie Roach when he's coaching. I'm sure that a lot of the stuff that Freddie Roach is teaching is very good, but there's definitely going to be stuff that's not going to work for George. But I'll be honest. I mean, I worked with Freddie Roach in the lead to the Marcus Davis fight. I used to live around the corner from Wildcard, and I was surprised at how deep his knowledge was about the sport of mixed martial arts. And he actually showed me a few nice little elbow techniques as well. So
nice.
Dirty as you could say.
Oh wow, that's awesome. That's a great tidbit of knowledge. And the other thing that I wanted to ask you specifically, Dan, is obviously there's this common notion that, and you mentioned that GSP is going to have to bring something different in terms of his stand up and striking if he does want to win, specifically on the feet. And there's this common notion that you don't really learn much in training camp. You just kind of prepare for your opponent, and that the learning is done out of camp where you're free to explore in training and practice and experiment. So I guess in some sense, do you see that as an advantage, even though, maybe there will be elements of cage rust? Do you think that's an advantage for George, that he's been on the sidelines for 4 years? We don't really know what he's been doing. Maybe he's been learning all sorts of new things. And do you think it is possible for George to come back sort of a new fighter with a new game? Or do you think it's kind of a bit of a mirage where a lot of these older fighters who are on the sidelines, they tend to feel like, we saw with BJ Penn, who felt reinvented, and unfortunately things didn't go his way?
Yeah, it's a strange one. Of course, with 4 years off and with the work rate that GSP has when he's in the gym, I certainly think he can have improved a lot of things about his game. And I'm sure in the gym he does look different and he feels different. And I'm sure his confidence does seem like it's at an all-time high, especially the way that he's been interacting with Bisping in the press conferences and stuff. It does seem like a much more confident George St-Pierre than we've seen before. And I'm sure a lot of that is down to the work that he's done. The difference comes when the pressure's on, when he starts to take shots, when he's had a couple of takedowns stuffed. Does he revert back to the stuff that's most familiar to him? Because that's what the majority of us would do. That fight or flight mode. You go back to the basics, back to the things that are the most comfortable and most familiar. Which obviously for George is a jab and a double leg, as Bisping's been pointing out. But yeah, I definitely think he could have added things to his game. There are benefits to taking some time off. I certainly feel, it's been 5 years since I fought last. I certainly feel now, physically I feel better. But, mentally I have a much broader perspective of the sport, and I have a much better appreciation for the development of the sport as well. George will have sat on the outside and absorbed it all, have taken it all in, watched the rise of Ronda Rousey and Conor McGregor, and seen the Demetrius Johnson breaking records and reshaping the sport. And George will have taken all that in. It's whether he can translate that to a performance on the night when the pressure's on.
The other, and it's interesting that you mentioned that, Dan, because that's the reason why George is coming back. That's a big talking point for a lot of people, because you mentioned that he's seen a lot of stuff happening in the UFC, but then at the same time, a lot of people are bringing up the fact that, he wanted this Bisping fight. He's mentioned that if this fight doesn't go his way, it's likely that he'll retire. And a lot of people are putting it more towards him sort of coming back maybe to make one last paycheck, get a fight where he can win a title, or maybe even go for this Conor McGregor fight. When you hear GSP talk about, retiring if he loses to Bisping, where do you think he's at mentally going into this fight?
I don't know. It's a good question. I think he's testing the water, because I think if he was determined on making a comeback and being the George St-Pierre of old, I think he would have come back at welterweight. I've spent a lot of time trying to figure out why he chose Michael Bisping as an opponent instead of Tyron Woodley or anybody else at welterweight. I mean, it would have made sense for him, really, in my eyes, to have come back against someone like Damian Maia, a respected name, someone that's got a fairly predictable game, someone that GSP could have shut down with his wrestling. But Tyron Woodley's a banana skin for anybody because of the way he fights and the power that he has in his hands. And GSP knows that Woodley would back up against the fence and defend his takedowns and try and knock him out with one punch. And that's not the kind of fight that GSP wants to come back for. And the other thing as well is Tyron Woodley's been talking about how he's the greatest welterweight of all time. And if George St-Pierre comes back and loses to Tyron Woodley, it does affect his legacy at welterweight, whereas losing to Bisping at middleweight doesn't have any effect on the record books in his campaign at welterweight. He's still the greatest welterweight of all time, even if he does come back and lose to Bisping. But if he comes back and wins, and he doesn't have to force himself down to 170 with a weight cut as well. A lot's changed, including USADA. No IV bags anymore and that kind of thing. So I kind of feel like he's chosen Bisping because he knows he's going to get a high pressure fighter that's going to be easier to take down than Woodley. That's not necessarily got the knockout power that Woodley's got. And that, if he loses to him, well, he's lost to the middleweight champion and he's still the greatest welterweight. I think it's a very strategic decision, but I'm sure there's a lot of thought that's gone into it.
I guess the biggest criticism from other fighters in the middleweight division is if GSP wins and does become the champion, they feel, because he wasn't a middleweight originally and he jumped the queue in a lot of ways to get this title shot. They feel like if he wins the title, he should, retain the title and defend the title. Do you think there's an obligation there, if he has jumped the queue, has come back against Michael Bisping, for him to at least defend the title once if he does win it this weekend?
Yeah, well, I mean, he said himself in his contract for the title fight against Bisping that it's in there that he defends against Whittaker immediately afterwards. And I think that he would. I think he would take a fight against Whittaker. Against someone like Rockhold, I don't think he would. I think he would rather relinquish the belt and maybe go for Woodley. But I think alternatively, I think he may fight Bisping, and if he wins and takes the belt, I think he'll challenge Tyron Woodley straight away. He comes back, he fights twice, he wins 2 belts, and then he retires. That's a good gamble in my eyes.
You also got to remember the Conor McGregor fight that a lot of people have been throwing out around, and you got to think the UFC would want that fight. Do you think that's sort of in the cards? Even though it seems like George doesn't want to call out McGregor because obviously McGregor being a smaller guy, do you think that's something on the horizon, especially with GSP talking about, the stock market, whose stock is an all-time high, which, certainly fits for McGregor?
I certainly think there's a conversation around it. I think the weight would be the issue. Conor, yes, Conor's a big lightweight. I think he's 5'8", 5'9", but he's got a long reach. But then, he just doesn't have the muscle mass that GSP's got now. If you've seen, the recent photos of GSP, he's much bigger than he was at welterweight, and even the old GSP was much bigger than Conor McGregor. So I think that there are a lot of advantages that Conor gives up against GSP, and that power is not transferable really against bigger guys. I think, obviously it would sell a lot. It would sell a lot of tickets, but I don't think it makes any sense. I think Conor could really solidify himself as one of the best in the world by just sticking around at lightweight and beating some of the monsters there. To fight GSP, he doesn't really gain a great deal from it, and I don't think GSP does either.
Well, while we're talking, we spoke about GSP's legacy, but we have to talk about Michael Bisping for a second, because this man has beaten guys like Luke Rockhold, Anderson Silva, Dan Henderson, and now he's fighting GSP. If Bisping does win this weekend, what do you think it does for his legacy? I know a lot of people are negative about the fact, that it is a welterweight moving up to middleweight, but still, this is a guy in GSP that a lot of people thought, was the guy for a really long time.
Yeah, I don't think Bisping gets as much credit as he should, really. I remember calling his first fight against Luke Rockhold in Australia, and I remember thinking to myself, if he loses this fight, I don't really see why he would continue on. But wow. In Michael Bisping style, he did. That was the one where he got the mounted one-arm guillotine.
Yeah,
and I kind of felt like he didn't look himself. He didn't look like he wanted to be in the fight. But then, he's such a determined individual, and look at him now. The world champion a few months on, and with a win over Anderson Silva, got that win back over Dan Henderson, and showed an immense amount of toughness in both fights. I think it's been an interesting story. It's been a bit of a fairy tale for him to have had the roller coaster career that he did, and to finally get a fight against GSP to add another legend to his record would be amazing for him, and it would be the perfect time to hang him up. But I just, Michael's just such a natural born fighter. I just don't think he could live without it. I think he'll have to wait till his body tells him that he absolutely cannot do it anymore to hang him up.
Absolutely. And I think in a lot of ways, perseverance is kind of the story of Bisping, not only in his fights, but also in his career. And it's just crazy that here he is, the champion, really climbing the pinnacle. Before we let you go, Dan, obviously we want to get a couple of predictions for you. We'll start with the main event, and obviously we want to hear your quick thoughts on the other fights just briefly in terms of predictions. But obviously we're talking about GSP versus Bisping, so let's start with that one, the main event. Who do you think's going over in your heart of hearts? Who are you leaning towards?
I think the safe money is Bisping by decision. I think with the grind that he's got, it wouldn't surprise me if he loses a round or two in the beginning. I certainly think GSP is going to come out and have a strong showing early on, certainly the first couple of rounds. But Bisping's tenacity and conditioning will get him through. And I feel like even if he loses a couple of the early rounds, he'll do enough in the later rounds to make a decision win for himself.
Earlier in the program, Robin Black pretty much broke down TJ Dillashaw versus Cody Garbrandt and made it really clear that this is going to be a super close fight and, it's going to be a super tough one to predict. So at the moment, where are you leaning towards when it comes to that fight? Do you think there'll be a new champion, TJ Dillashaw, or do you think Garbrandt's going to be able to hold on to his title?
I kind of, the closer the fight gets, the more I think like Cody Garbrandt's going to catch him with something. I look at both of their styles, and obviously they're both very talented strikers, but the difference is that Dillashaw needs a number of strikes to do a lot of damage, whereas Cody's got that one-punch knockout power. We saw it against Thomas Almeida. We saw him drop Mizugaki with it. Beautiful, short right hand every time. And even, Dominic Cruz felt it with that right hook. I think it was the fourth round of their fight. But then, you look at Dillashaw and you look at his finish over Barao. I mean, that was a lot of punches that he threw, and Barao was still on his feet. And I put Garbrandt in that situation, and I think he's done with 2 or 3 punches in that same situation. So I think that, a win for Dillashaw is much more of a grind than it is for Garbrandt. I think Garbrandt can stand his ground, defend takedowns, kind of hit Dillashaw as he's moving. Just keep clubbing him with that right hand, and eventually something's going to get through. I think if Dillashaw gets the win, he's going to have to work a lot harder for it. He's going to have to really put his striking and wrestling together, and try and ground the fight for as much as possible and stay on top and land some strikes, because sometimes he has a habit of getting drawn into a firefight on the feet, and I think with Garbrandt, he ends up on his knees. It's going to be a tough fight for Dillashaw if he wins.
I agree with you 100%. And even TJ, when he talks about his advantages, he always points to his fight IQ. And I get the feeling that he's subtly trying to say that he's going to be using all elements, especially the grappling, especially trying to take him down as opposed to just stand there and have a firefight. Before we let you go, obviously we got to hear your thoughts on Rose Namajunas challenging Joanna Jedrzejczyk for the women's strawweight belt. What do you think about this one? Do you think Rose has anything new to show Joanna that she hasn't seen before, or do you think Joanna's going to be retaining?
I think it might be a step too far for Rose at this point in her career. She's obviously growing very quickly. She's very technical and well-rounded. But the reason that Joanna stayed on top for so long is because she knows what she's good at, and she's built her game around it. She's a world-class Muay Thai fighter. So she's developed a game that allows her to force her opponents into that range. Excellent takedown defense, and she looks bigger and stronger since she's brought a nutritionist on board. I really feel like she's preparing for that move to flyweight already. So she's a huge strawweight. You saw that when she fought Jessica Andrade. I think that the way that Rose wins this fight, if she can do it, is to cause chaos, is to be a bit wild, to be a bit reckless. And it's not a smart game plan, because it's difficult to maintain that kind of pace for 5 rounds. But I think if she wins, it's not going to be a long game. I think Rose has got to get to the back of Joanna, get her hooks in, and look to strangle her, because at any point when Joanna's facing her, she's going to be taking shots.
Well, there you guys go. One of the best commentators and analysts in the game, Dan Hardy. Thank you so much for coming onto the program. Guys, make sure to grab his book. His first book is now out. You can grab it from Amazon, or here in Australia, it's out in bookshops. Go to your bookshop, get it. It's called Part Reptile. It's a fantastic read. And, of course, follow him on Twitter at Dan Hardy, MMA Dan. Thank you for making your Submission Radio debut on this week, the big week before UFC 217. We're excited to see you in Sydney. Thanks again for coming onto the program.
No problem, guys. It's been good talking to you, and I will see you in Sydney. Catch you later.
Hey, this is Tony Okagui Ferguson, and you guys listen to Submission Radio. Keep tuning in, guys.
All right, guys, as you may remember, last week, Sean Sheehan made a FIFA challenge to all MMA media on last week's episode of Submission Radio. Well, Danny Segura answered his challenge, and once it was labeled the FIFA contest of the century, New York Rick quickly got on board, seeing the amount of money that could be made from the investment. Now, the first time ever joining Submission Radio is Danny, his promoter, New York Rick, and Mr. Worldwide himself, the host of one of the biggest podcasts in the MMA game, Sean Sheehan. Gentlemen, welcome to the program.
Hello there. How are you? Great to be here.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having myself and my client. It's about time.
It is an absolute pleasure to have you guys on the show. Not only to have you on the show, but all at the same time. So it's a huge honor. Let's just find out what exactly happened and how this started here, because I want to hear from your perspective, Danny. You know, we saw a lot of media heard the call out. They saw it. There were some excuses. James Lynch was talking about how if this was NHL 94, damn it, James, you know this is FIFA. Other MMA media talked about how much they wanted in terms of pay, the old, ducking through the manager. There was a lot of ducking. But then you stood up, one man emerged, and that was you, Danny, and took on the challenge. What made you want to take on this challenge and take on Sean Sheehan himself?
Well, I just know that I'm really good at FIFA and I can beat most people ever. And New York Rick, he's smart enough to recognize that as well, being my manager. He's great. So he just plugged me in. He tagged me on the tweet. I was a little upset you guys didn't consider me originally and you guys didn't tag me. But that's all right. And I basically just looked at my mentions on Twitter and saw the challenge and, pretty confident I can take Sean. Had no issues jumping on.
Well, Danny, you need to understand, this was all a big ploy to really put a chip on your shoulder. We knew you were out in the wings. We knew you were sitting above the Raptors looking down on the FIFA contest. We just wanted to get that fire going because we knew as soon as you saw you went tag. No, I'm kidding. Half of the marketing department's being fired at Submission Radio. Now, Rick, let's talk about this the sneakiness that's come about with you becoming a promoter for this man, Danny. I hear Danny met with many a promoter and decided to go with yourself. Of course, people have compared you to the Paul Heyman of the Brock Lesnar, I suppose, I don't know. I ran out of other promoter ideas. Talk to us. It's early here in Australia. Talk to us. How exactly did you sign up Danny? How did you convince him to be a part of your group? And are you going to, I suppose, have some kind of introduction or mentorship going into this big match?
I've been representing Danny for a long, long time. He's one of the brightest young stars in this MMA journalism game. Anytime there's an opportunity to insert him into something, I will do it as the advocate for the greatest living MMA journalist, Danny Segura. And I have to correct the facts a little bit. Actually, the call went out, and I was tagged in this, and I immediately tagged my client, Danny Segura. I'm not some Johnny come lately. I didn't jump into this once Danny was enlisted. I, in fact, inserted him into the conversation and made this happen. And I'd like Sean to thank me. I'd like you guys to thank me. Danny Segura doesn't need to thank me because he sends me those sweet, sweet checks every month in the mail. But everybody else in the MMA sphere needs to thank me for making this happen.
Now, Sean, before we jump to the opening statements, of course, there's going to be opening statements from Rick, from Danny, and from Sean. Before we go to that, I want to get your, I suppose, thoughts on when you found out Danny would be your challenger and also the man himself, New York Rick, becoming a part of the challenge. Were you surprised at this? A lot of people have been talking about how New York Rick was afraid to take the challenge himself and thus passed it on to a more skilled and a younger, sexier man in the MMA industry.
Listen,
answer that one, Sean.
I'm going to do my talking now, my opening statement. Let's get to the opening statements. Let's get to that. That's what I want to get to. That's what I have my opening statement. I'm ready. New York Rick and Danny have brought it. They're obviously ready. I'm ready. Let's do it. Let's get there. This is the main event. It doesn't care how it came about. It's here. We're here. Let's do it. Danny's been running for me for the last few days. He said he'd do it last Sunday. Where was he? He wasn't there. Rick came on Monday on the MMA Hour, said, he'll do it tonight or in the next couple of days. Now he said next Sunday.
Next Sunday, yeah. Last Sunday, I was handing out L's in real soccer on the field.
I'm amazed you're here now.
Sundays is now I'm going to take it digital and hand another L then.
I think he's just preparing. That's it. I think he needs practice. 5 days. 5 days is going to be enough. I'm sitting here. I'm recording podcasts. I'm right. I'm not doing anything. You're obviously practicing. You're not confident enough in your game. Come on.
We'll see on Sunday, but my accolades speak for themselves. Division 4. I don't only do career mode. I actually go online, take on players.
You better beat me.
Build my way from Division 9 to Division 4. I've been extremely close to making Division 3 so many times. Took Chad Ochocinco, famous football player, to distance in a FIFA game last year. My accolades speak for themselves. So,
I'm a rookie.
Danny,
I've never played
Sean,
online.
Danny, we have to take control of this forum. Come on, guys. We're all professionals here. It sounds like the Michael Bisping of FIFA. He's worked hard to get up to that level 4. So let's give him the respect that he deserves. I'll open up the floor to New York Rick with the opening statement as the promoter for Danny and a co-promoter for this big match.
I think, on behalf of my client, I'd like to thank you guys for at least entertaining this opportunity. Sean, I'd like to thank you for being so silly as to offer this up and to also consider yourself having the best hair in the MMA game when clearly that title goes to me. And that was what initially caught my eye and allowed me to insert Danny into this conversation. So I would like to thank you for that, for giving Danny the opportunity to squash you. Having said that, I think it's clear in terms of FIFA skills, in terms of MMA media presence, in terms of handsomeness. It's a clean sweep for Danny Segura. They're going to have to break out a new scoring system. It's going to be a 10-0, and that's actually going to be the number of goals Danny scores. He's going to leave him on nil, and Danny's going to score 10. He's guaranteed this to me. It's actually written into my contract. So, Danny, make it happen so I can get paid. I almost feel bad. Sean doesn't really have the experience to go up against a professional player like Danny. So I do respect the effort, but it's going to be a clean sweep. As to the aspersions he was casting about how long Danny needed, Danny's not scared. Danny's here in New York City working ahead of UFC 217.
Scared.
Danny's here producing content for the biggest UFC event of the year.
Scared.
And beyond that, we need time to promote this because we're the A side. The B side over there is not doing any of the promotion required for this. You're sending out little GIF videos. Show me the receipts. I want to see the FIFA skills. I want to see some videos. Put something out there that tells me that you are worthy of this challenge.
Wow. Sean, I feel like the UFC 202 pre-fight presser with the water bottle throwing incident has nothing on this. How do you respond to all these accusations, wild and or accurate, by New York Rick, Sean?
Listen, first of all, let me just congratulate Danny on getting onto a podcast. It's a big deal for him. I know it's his first podcast. Well done getting on there. Listen, what happened here is Rick contacted me. He took Danny under his wing. He said, look, this guy needs some exposure. I know you're one of the best guys in MMA media. You have a big following online. I have a big following online. People need to know who Danny is. I know Danny's a talented guy. I know it. Me and New York Rick, we came together. We're the men in this. We put this together. We're bringing Danny on. Danny's going to do well. He's going to get a lot of exposure from this. And, he could go far after this. So that's what, congratulations on him for getting this far. He's getting on the podcast, getting into a game of FIFA with me. Well done. In fairness, you have to give it to him for getting this far. And, Rick is a great manager. He's done a great job with him. He knew the man to contact. He knew me. He knew I'd talk about it. He knew I'd get him on here. He knew I had a relationship with you guys on Submission Radio. No, it's all coming together well. So congratulations, Danny, and getting on here. Good business, Rick. I enjoyed it. And let's do it.
Wow, a very positive statement there from Sean. Danny, it is your turn to take the floor. The floor is yours. For all the people out there that have been waiting to hear you speak about this, give us your statement about this big match.
Sure. I mean, I've been on the biggest shows, the MMA Hour, the MMA Beat. But we're not here to talk about MMA.
Submission Radio.
Submission Radio. Obviously, now that you guys have me on, you guys are doing great. But yeah, Sean Sheehan is saying, why didn't he take me on Sunday? Why didn't he take me on Tuesday? But I'm a professional. I just don't fight anyone any given day. Any event that I'm in needs to be built up, needs to be big. And, that's why we're here talking about it. So again, as the A side, I have no issues, coming on, giving a podcast and this statement as well. And I'll take on Sean as many times as he wants. I'll give him a million rematches. But one thing's for sure, that I will hand him an L one after another. There's no doubt I'm the best FIFA player in the MMA media game. And made no mistake, because I saw some rumors and some fake news going on Twitter. This is for the inaugural MMA media FIFA World Championship.
Yes.
Sean Sheehan is no champion. By no means.
I'm the champion. I'm
no champion. He's being anyone. That is a
hit my crown
title. So yeah, this is for the real belt, and I'm gonna be the first and the only MMA media FIFA World Champion. So that's all I got to say. Sunday night, I'll let my fingers and hands do the talking, and we'll see how it turns out for him.
Well,
They
this
show
is
up on
great
Sunday,
because
like
this is
I
great
wonder
because
when they show up.
it shows that this is obviously going to be the first of many challenges and an MMA media FIFA season, so to speak. There are rumors there will be a money belt, probably false, but maybe. I guess the big question is, New York Rick, you being the promoter of this, when can fans actually tune in to watch this? What is the official date, and where can they watch it? And are there any secret rules or stipulations that we need to be aware of?
You know what? You don't get that yet. When we decide,
There's a press
when
release.
Danny and I decide as the A side, when this is going to go down, we're thinking Sunday, but who knows? I could change my mind. Danny could change his mind. When we decide to make this happen, you will know. The people will know.
Scared.
For now,
Scared.
just be home on Sunday. Recover from UFC 217. Get yourself ready. Have a nice, Gatorade in the morning. Cure that hangover, and then wait, because Sunday, at some indeterminate time, but we will let you know in the future, there's going to be an ass whooping handed out. Way more impressive than anything that happens at UFC 217. Danny Segura is going to beat Sean Sheehan into submission.
No chance.
On the FIFA 17.
No
and anybody
chance.
who's telling me about FIFA 18,
He's running scared.
FIFA
He's
17
afraid.
is the best one. That's what we
He's
want.
afraid. He's scared.
Nah, and look, I have no problem doing 18 as well. I could beat him in both 17 and 18. So
there it is. You heard it.
Let's do it.
And you know what? Let me say one last thing before we move on, because I think it's important. If we are going to continue this, if there are other MMA media members who are going to see this beatdown and want to step up and face my guy, Danny Segura, good luck to you. But he is going to be holding this title for a long, long time. They're going to retire this belt. In fact, we're not all going to be around by the time this is done. And Danny Segura is going to go down in the history books as the greatest MMA media member to ever play FIFA. Guaranteed.
Wow, what a statement from New York Rick. I mean, this thing is all coming together nicely. Couple of things. Number one, for the people listening here in Australia, make sure that you don't wait around on Sunday by the phones or the computers, because we're on a time difference, and UFC 217 will be on at
And
that
Danny
time.
won't show
So
up.
that's going to be a Monday for you guys to wait around for. But guys, Rick, I need to find out from you, because Sean had created, it's not just for the belt, it's not just for the prestige. There is also on the line a little bit of a wager, a little bit of a bet. If Sean loses this match, we've spoken about it. He spoke about it on the show last week on his esteemed podcast, Severe MMA, one of the best shows out there. You guys have to subscribe to it. He will announce on that show that person who beats him is the greatest player, the champion at FIFA. Now, I'm wondering, you guys, MMA beat, MMA fighting, a big group yourself, are you in on the bet? If Sean beats Danny, will Danny go on a forum and admit that Sean is, in fact, the greatest FIFA player?
You'll have to start the podcast first.
I will go on Monday on New York Rick's, little segment on the MMA Hour, Rick's Picks, which is amazing. You all got to tune in Monday at 1 p.m. the MMA Hour.
Heard of it.
I will give, if he manages to beat me, which it's almost impossible. I mean, I will have to.
I hear the doubt. I hear the doubt.
Beat me. There's no doubt. Look, if he beats me, I will admit that he is the best MMA media person to play FIFA. So I guess I'll admit it on New York's Rick segment if it goes down, but it won't.
I had trouble even staying awake during this. I can't even consider the possibility that Sean is going to win this.
It's just.
But should that happen?
About it.
Should Danny get struck by lightning while he's
You'll have to ask permission. Ask Gary permission
to be
there.
honest, he would still probably be able to beat Sean even if he got struck by lightning playing this game. But if Danny, for some reason, is about to lose, I'm going to come over and take the sticks and beat Sean myself. That's how confident I am in this happening. There's not a chance in hell Sean is going to beat Danny. And if he does, guess what? I'm coming over to pick up the sticks and score 10 goals on him.
Wow. I think it is no understatement to say this is the greatest thing that's ever happened to soccer, digital or real. And I don't think anybody would ever disagree with that. Before we let you guys go, and obviously the stakes are incredibly high. While we're talking about stakes, UFC 217 is this weekend. Why not? It is a UFC 217 preview show. Might as well detour, get a couple of predictions as we let you guys go. Sean, I'll give you the first word. Let's go Cody Garbrandt versus TJ Dillashaw. If you have a cheeky prediction for us, how do you see this one going down? Who's winning it?
God, I have to turn off my heel promo for there for a second.
Regular Sean now.
I think I think Cody will win. It's interesting. There's a lot of ways this fight could go. I have a feeling TJ is going to come out and try to wrestle a lot more than he has in his last few fights, and if he does, that could be a good way to victory for him. But I think Cody's wrestling is good, and it's not that it has improved. We haven't seen him have to use it that much. We saw it against Dominic Cruz a little bit, and it looked very good. So I think if that battle isn't a huge win for TJ, if he can't get him down in 2, 3, 4 rounds and it stays on the feet, I think Cody will end up winning. I think he just hits a lot harder. He's more accurate, and he'll end up hurting TJ a lot more, I think, than TJ will hurt him. Like we saw it against Dominic Cruz. TJ missed an awful lot of shots in that fight, whereas those similar sort of shots Cody was landing with him. And I think Dominic Cruz is a better defender than both these guys. So if Cody can land him on Cruz, I think he can definitely land him on TJ. I think it'll be a decision, but I think Cody will probably win 3 or 4 rounds.
There we go. I'll just get a yay or nay from the rest of the people on the phone call if they agree with that prediction.
Yay.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, awesome. Now, Danny, let's move on to your prediction for Joanna versus Rose. A lot of people feel like this could be the fight which after Joanna may move up a division. Before she does that, though, do you see her beating Rose? Do you think Rose can dethrone the champ, which is kind of what you'll be doing when you're taking on Sean?
Well, no, this is for the inaugural title. Let's make no mistake about that. For the Joanna Jedrzejczyk matchup versus Rose Namajunas, this is, I think, maybe one of the easier fights to pick from the 3 title fights of the card. Rose is super skilled. I think she's more well-rounded than Joanna, and I think she's probably the more well-rounded, fighter at that weight class. But that doesn't necessarily mean that'll be enough to beat Joanna. I think to beat Joanna, I think you need a fighter that's more suited like a Claudia Gadelha style, but perhaps with a little bit better cardio. But somebody that's really tough, that can hold his own in the striking, but doesn't necessarily need to be super good at striking, just as long as they have like really good wrestling and can close the distance. I don't know if Rose is that kind of fighter. I think she's got really good range, really good striking, really good jiu-jitsu, but her wrestling exactly is not really there. She's not really like a power double type fighter. So I think she's going to have a hard time taking down Joanna Jedrzejczyk. And on the feet, I think Rose can be very competitive, and I think we will see a fun fight. But, over the course of 5 rounds, I think Joanna has just, a little bit better technique, a little bit better timing, a little bit more accuracy. So I think she'll probably win a decision and beat Rose over the course of 5 rounds.
I agree with you fully. And the scary thing is, since going to American Top Team, she's gotten even better than she has, previously. And we saw that obviously in the Andrade fight. New York Rick, I feel like we're saving the best till last. And after this, we'll ask all of you guys your thoughts on the main event. But we know you've got Rick's picks. But for all the Australians, a new demographic here. What do you think about GSP versus Michael Bisping? Can GSP go in there, do it, dethrone Michael Bisping and really cement his claim as potentially the greatest of all time? Or do you think the count gets it done this weekend, UFC 217?
You would leave the most difficult one to me, and I appreciate that.
Also the most fun, and everybody else can jump in afterwards as well.
That's okay. I'll take care of all of it so they don't have to. The matchup between Michael Bisping and George St-Pierre is one that is endlessly fascinating because there's so many unknowns. We don't know what shape GSP is going to come into this fight, and we don't know what he's been doing in the time off that will help him in this bout. He could look like a completely different fighter. By the time we saw him at the end of his UFC run, he was kind of a guy who was focused on pumping that jab and then mixing in a little bit of the takedowns that he became famous for before that. Is that going to be the same fighter that we see? I don't imagine he'll be utilizing that game plan. If he gets into a contest of technical boxing with Michael Bisping, I don't know how good he's going to do. I think Bisping's a little bit better there. I think Bisping's a lot bigger there, which is going to be a key factor. If he's able to get in on the takedowns, and I think Michael Bisping's takedown defense is pretty solid. If he's able to get in on the takedowns, I could see a path to victory for him. But ultimately, I think Bisping's going to be a little too big, a little too crafty, and just more active. The reality of ring rust is going to be apparent in this fight. I think George St-Pierre is going to look a little bit older than we remember him, and Bisping's going to be able to get it done.
Danny or Sean, any sort of closing segments or anything you guys want to add? Anything that stand out to you about this one?
Yeah, I pretty much agree with Rick there. Like, I was watching Carlos Condit fight during the week, and he was maybe 18 months out before that one with a knee injury, and the first thing he said after the fight was ring rust is real. And this is 4 years more and up another weight class. I think it's going to be very, very tough. Like, I think if it's 100% GSP, the best GSP we've ever seen, I think he'll beat Michael Bisping. But there's no logic that says it is going to be the best GSP we've ever seen. It just can't be. And I think Bisping will be able to get forward pressure, and I think he'll win over 5 rounds.
I think I disagree maybe with you guys a little bit in the sense of ring rust. I think GSP was very worn out from just holding the title and all these fights. So I think there could be a room there for this layoff to be actually good for him. We won't find out until he actually fights, of course. But I just think that this is just a bad matchup. Even if GSP shows up in full form, Michael Bisping has one of the best takedown defenses in MMA, probably one of the most underrated too. I mean, this is a guy who out-wrestled Chael Sonnen when Chael Sonnen was in his prime, and his wrestling was just ridiculous. So yeah, I just think, and also he's moving up a weight class, and we know that, although in striking weight doesn't really matter that much, in wrestling it matters a whole lot, So I think, I think this is just a tough fight for GSP. Plus the layoff as well, it could be a factor. So I see Bisping defeating GSP as well.
Well, guys, make sure to follow the hot young thing in MMA media. If you still haven't followed him, Danny Segura. It's at Danny Segura TV on Twitter, of course, at New York Rick for the man himself on Twitter, and at Sean Sheehan BA to follow this huge feud, this huge contest, see what's happening next. Make sure to keep an eye on it. You do not want to miss the inaugural championship, FIFA championship for the MMA media. There's a lot on the line. There's a lot of chips on shoulders, and New York Rick is bound to make millions of dollars from this as well. So this is going to be a huge, huge deal. And a big thank to all our other guests for the UFC 217 preview show, Jake Shields, Robin Black, Dan Hardy, John Morgan, and Tommy Toehold for his exclusive GSP interview. Guys, it's a rarity that we get huge cards like this, so enjoy this one this weekend. Have a safe, enjoyable time watching the fights, and we'll be back next week.